Okay. That gets rid of it, so that makes it better. Not a problem. There it is. Where's it higher? Okay, good enough. Ah, hi, Michelle. Yep, you're muted. And let's see if I got my volume turned on. That'll matter as well. Let's see. Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yep, I can hear you fine, Jim. Happy
Good,
Sunday.
and I hear you now too. Happy Sunday.
Good, good.
So I don't need to wear it, and it fogs my glasses. But I'm prepared today in case I needed one.
Yay! Very cool.
Now, so you're a panelist. Would you like to also be a host?
I didn't do the practice last week to be a host. What do I have to do?
Well, here, I'll show you. You are now a co-host. That means that you have some controls down at the bottom. Like if you click on the participants list,
Mm-hmm.
and notice that it has two tabs, panelists, which is, the tabs mean the same things you're used to. The
Yep.
little red dot that's blinking means it's recording.
Okay.
And you can click on attendees, and you'll only see one right now, and that's my desktop, which doesn't have a microphone anyway. But you'll notice when you point at it, you can allow it to talk. And under more, interesting, it says you can promote to panelist. That didn't work during our test, but I upgraded my Zoom today. So I'm going to try it, see if it works now. It worked. Although now he's in the panelist section where he doesn't need to be. So I can go to the panelist section and take Jay Russo. And under more, I can say change role to attendee. And I just changed him back to being an attendee. So that's working now.
Mm-hmm.
Upgraded the Zoom version on both of my computers this morning. If you haven't done that in a while, it's good to do it every couple of weeks because they keep adding features and fixing bugs.
I think I did it last month.
So that means you can help. If
Mute people?
Hmm?
I can help mute people and let them in the front door of the, there's like a door I'm supposed to let people in, right?
There's no door to let people in.
Oh, good.
They show up as attendees automatically. And if an attendee raises his hand, which one is going to do right now just for practice, if you watch near the bottom of your screen, you'll see an alert.
Mm-mm.
Oh,
Oh, it's up there in the corner. Okay.
did it say that somebody raised their hand?
Yeah, but it was up. I was looking in the upper lower, and it showed up in the upper right. So I missed it.
It may vary as to where it is.
Yeah.
So if I raise hand, interesting.
Okay. I just clicked on something.
If you have the attendees list open and are looking at it, the ones with hands raised automatically come to the top of the list. So if there's like 100 people there and 3 of them have their hands raised, those 3 will be at the top of the list. And
All right. I clicked on something. I lost. Hold on. Let me see the.
Now, we're not going to let people talk in the middle of the presentation, but if it's a time in the meeting where it's appropriate to let people talk, we click on allow to talk next to their name, and it allows them to talk. But it's probably a good idea to say, I see Jay Russo has his hand raised. I'll now allow him to talk. And at that point, if he was muted, he got a thing that said the host would like you to unmute, but he has the choice of talking or not. The fact that he raised his hand probably meant he wanted to. But I have 2 computers here, so on the one over there, it shows me what the attendees are seeing. And that particular attendee just got that message about the host wants him to unmute, which he can't because there's no microphone on that computer. And I can also lower all the hands by clicking the button at the bottom of the participants list that says lower all hands. Sometimes we use hands as to answer a question. Scott just logged on using, interesting. I see, yep, Scott just got here too. Now, you guys probably also noticed like 4 windows right now. Michelle, Jim, Scott, and one that says Jay Russo, which just has a picture of me on it. That's because for that account, I have a picture. Otherwise, it would say Jay Russo. But only the panelists see the ones that are only the picture or only the name. The attendees see only the ones that have their camera turned on. Good morning, Scott.
Good morning.
Yeah. Okay, so Scott is here as well. So besides being a panelist, I will also promote Scott to being a co-host. He knows what that means because he's done it before. So Michelle's also a co-host. And with that, I can go and warm my coffee and whatever. I invited Father John and Deacon Jean to join us at the 1 o'clock point to help with getting things started, saying a prayer, stuff like that. And Father James will probably join us later in the session after he finishes with the next Mass. And probably some other things he has to do after Mass. But hopefully before the end, he'll show up so he can maybe say the closing prayer is what I suggested to him. And the sign-up page is now automatically going straight to the Zoom sign-up so that I no longer have to monitor the email to watch for new sign-ups. I only have to monitor the email to watch for people that are having trouble.
Very good.
Good, no new emails. Stick this coffee in the oven. Maybe get some lunch.
How you doing, Scott?
Okay.
A little confused by the weather. It seems snowing and melting simultaneously, and I don't know what to do with that. So,
Yeah, you know what's funny is I was just out driving and I saw trucks with salt, and I said to my kids, "Uh-oh, something is coming. The roads are going to be slippery."
mm-hmm.
I got to see my mom yesterday.
Oh, good.
Yeah, that was our Christmas.
Okay.
My sister got COVID, and she was with my mom just a couple days before Christmas. So she tested, she was getting symptoms, and then she tested and found out she had COVID. So my mom had to isolate. And so our whole family's been kind of waiting and wondering, what can we do next?
Mm-hmm.
So my mom has sold her house, and that's the last time I'll be in my ever going back in my home. And it was like a time when we wondered, you know, will we see Mom for Christmas? And hi, Deacon Jean.
Hey, how you doing, Scott?
Good, welcome.
Thanks.
You know Michelle.
Hi. I don't know if we've met, but hello.
Hello. Good to see you. Okay, getting ready to start?
Yeah. So I just came from St. Thomas. I was over at the Latin Mass.
Oh, you're brushing up on your Latin, eh?
Yeah, my wife and kids like to go over there to the Latin Mass. So there's a lot of friends that go over there, so they know. You know, ever since COVID, they've been kind of separated from their homeschool group and different things going on at different parishes. So they chose going to 11 o'clock mass at St. Thomas works, and it's in Latin. Oh, well.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to learn Spanish sometime. That's a Romance language, so
Yeah.
maybe some of my old Latin would come in handy.
Oh, yeah. Do you use anything like Duolingo?
No?
It's a really good program. You just go on the internet. It's free. And every day you can spend 5 to 15 minutes. A simple little exercise. And over the course of a year,
Oh, what's it called?
Duolingo.
Lingual.
Duolingo. Duolingo.
Oh, Duolingo. Oh,
Two languages.
Duolingo. Okay.
Mhm.
Duolingo.
And
Okay.
I do it in Polish. So I've completed about 380 days in Polish.
Ah. Dubsha.
Dobrze. So it's simple because you can, it's almost like Bishop Boyer's Year of the Bible. You can spend 5 or 20 minutes, each day just reading a little bit of the Bible.
Sure.
By the end of a period of time, you think, wow, I really learned something.
Sure. Yeah, I
Grad-
like languages.
Scott, are we supposed to be able to see the video of the attendees as they join? We have the people are starting to sign in now. Are we expecting to see the videos as well, or just the panelists? Remind me, I already forgot.
Yeah, we're not expected to see anyone's camera on.
Okay,
When they come in, they will be both muted. It'll be basically like they're watching the program. We're the program
okay.
until Yolanda comes.
People are starting to log in now, so that's good already. Yay.
Yeah, we welcome Teresa Ungena and Spencer Mullins is here. Patricia Kennedy, Mo Nagpal is here, and of course Jim Russo. It's nice to welcome the attendees.
Yes.
Did you know Jim and I went to the same high school, Scott?
Teresa has her hand up, and so I'm going to allow her to
Please do.
talk. I'm going to
Yes.
ask her to go ahead and unmute.
Hey, Scott, I wanted to tell you, Teresa, however you said it, it's actually Terry Angina. And I think you
Good.
told me probably better by Terry.
Mary and Gina, very good.
Yeah, you know my better by that name. So, but Teresa's my proper name. So I'm nice to be here with you guys.
Spell Terry the way you like it.
Terry.
All right, very good. I got you named now.
Almost.
Hey, can you see it, Michelle?
And yeah, and good morning to Mo and Patricia and Spencer as well. If you guys want to be able to talk, you may as well practice it now. Push the raise hand button at the bottom, and when you do that, one of us will allow your mic to come on so you can talk.
Yeah, nice.
Oh, we got to do something besides just talk?
Well, once there's a significant number of people around, maybe Deacon Jean could lead us in an opening prayer. And Scott and Michelle and Bill, certainly. Bill's quite competent to be a presenter himself, but he's not our main presenter today.
Who are we talking about?
Welcome, Therese Bircher.
Excuse me?
I'm just welcoming another participant attending. If anyone wants to talk that's not on the panel here in the video. If you want to talk, you can just raise your hand and we'll allow you to turn on your microphone.
This is Mo. I just wanted to thank everyone for doing this today.
All right.
Appreciate that.
Thank you, Mo. And for the sake of the team, I'll mention that after folks have talked, we probably could turn off their mic, mainly so that our screens don't get full of names, which are showing whose mic is turned on.
Yeah. What, I'm sorry, what was that?
Oh, I was talking to Scott and Michelle.
Ah.
We're monitoring the attendee list. And when folks raise their hand, we're turning on their microphone. And it puts their name up on our screen. And Bill, I think you can see that screen as well. It shows Terry's name and Mo's name. And I'm looking to see if I can succeed in actually let's see.
Hi, Father John.
Hello.
Ah,
Bienvenido.
Gracias.
I know Deacon Gene wants to learn some Spanish, so we can practice here.
Yeah, when I retire, I'll do some more.
30 years ago, Bishop Pavish told us, start learning Spanish.
yes, indeed.
Yeah.
So apparently we're the only Corpus Christi folks in attendance at this moment. Is that right? Yeah.
Be not afraid.
Oh, everybody's got coffee but me.
Go get
I have to go make some coffee. I'll be right back.
We want to welcome Sharon Sheldon and Patricia Kennedy. If anyone wants to speak, again, all you do is raise your hand feature and we'll let you turn on your microphone. Father John, this is your first Martin Luther King here at St. Francis.
Yes, it is.
Normally, we're getting ready to hear the choir at 5 p.m. Mass from Corpus Christi and preparing a nice meal.
Oh, yeah, that sounds better than a Zoom, but
Right. We welcome Ralph Powell, Joyce and Rick Reshi are here, and Corey Yee. Welcome, Dick Brown. Again, if anyone wants to speak, you can raise your hand and we'll allow you to unmute. Yeah, our PAC dinner usually has lots of decorations, quotes by Martin Luther King. And
Later after the presentation, there'll be a time for questions and answers. And questions can be submitted through the chat or through well, I think the Q&A is where we decided we prefer to have them. So I think we'll officially announce Q&A is a good place to put questions. But if raising hands will be used as a way of sort of showing sign of support or answer, like how many of you know about something. You could raise your hand to say, yes, I'm one of those people. That way you get a quick count without hearing lots of voices. But we can also allow you to speak. And Cheryl's with us. So.
welcome, Cheryl.
Hi, how's everybody?
Good. I know Bill won't feel so lonely anymore because He wanted to see some other Corpus Christi people.
We won't be in the woods anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, Cheryl.
How are you?
Good.
How are you, Michelle?
Pardon?
Jim, and who's the other one?
Valerie.
Deacon. Okay.
Mhm.
Welcome, Father John.
Thank you.
Valerie, is it okay if I put your name like that on the screen?
I guess so. Oh, I see it. Yeah, sure.
Okay, I spelled it okay.
Yeah, you did.
Oh,
Mhm.
good.
Unfortunately, I don't know how to make coffee, so Bill had to go up and get his own. I do if he has a Keurig around, I could do it.
Well, we've all passed the first step. We're all in here, so, or
Yep.
at least those of us who have come so far.
Yes. This morning I received an email from our Congresswoman Debbie Dingell, which references one of the sayings from Dr. King. And during this preliminary time, while we don't seem to have all that much to talk about, I'm going to share that with you guys. Give me a little more practice of how to do one of these. And
Cheryl, were you able to see the participants as well?
okay, what do I? Yeah, so only in darkness can you see the stars.
Hmm. Everyone can serve.
Mhm. Okay. Enough of that one.
It's strange how after all the years since Martin Luther King has been gone, it is so very relevant today.
Mhm.
Mm.
Yeah.
It's kind of a sad statement on our society today, but hopefully we go forward with a lot of hope.
Yep. The gospel never grows irrelevant or
No.
obsolete.
Mary Davis sends blessings to us all. And she said that she hopes that we have a really good presentation.
For those of you that don't know Mary, Mary is employed at Corpus Christi Parish. She's a real leader, and she happened to, I think, break her ankle. Is that right?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, just recently suffering. Welcome.
Hi, Yolanda. We can't hear you.
Go get that.
Hello, everybody.
There you are. Hi.
Hello, hello.
Hi.
Hello.
How's everything?
Good. In addition to the 8 or 9 people that you can see on the screen, we do have 14 attendees. So we want to welcome the attendees and remind them if they want to speak, you can just raise your hand on the hand feature and we'll ask you to unmute your microphone.
Here comes the boss.
How's your coffee, Bill?
Still perking. So, yeah, it's going to be good, but I've got to wait. I have to have patience. I don't use the Keurig anymore. I decided that wasn't a good idea. So.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon, Curtis.
So,
Yes, happy Sunday. Happy Sunday. Welcome,
Sunday.
everybody.
That's a true
Hello.
word. Happy Sunday.
Of course, today of all days, I had computer issues.
Uh-oh.
Of course.
Use another laptop, so I'm hoping I'm coming through clear. I seem like it's dark over here, but good to see everybody. Father John.
You
Hello.
look better than usual, Curtis. That must be a really good laptop.
I stole my sons.
The kids always have the best stuff.
Absolutely.
Hi, Dick. Did you have a comment?
Yeah, just a quick question. Can you see us at all?
No.
You don't need to.
I just wonder, okay, just want to make sure you realize we're here and present. Okay.
This is a webinar platform. And so we can see on the list that there are 9 panelists, or 10, because Bill and Valerie are together. And you can see the panelists. And then the attendees are about 13 or 14. We can see your names.
Welcome, everybody who's here.
Yes, indeed. So, okay, look at view here.
What are your masses like at Corpus Christi? Do you have a limited number of people that come as well, or?
Yes, we max out, including clergy, choir, at 88.
Okay.
Yeah, we max out at 88. We could probably fit more, but we just try to practice the extreme social distancing and safety protocols. But we're getting comfortably. We're getting numbers slowly but surely. People are getting a little more comfortable coming, but got a long way to go. Got a long way to go.
Yeah.
How about you guys?
We're still at the 150 mark, having people sign up.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. Some people like to sign up, and then some people feel like we're going to a party. It's like, hey, man, it's your RSVP. I think it is.
Yeah, I think more people are starting to come, and I don't know if, I think they might be getting tired of signing up, but it's worked pretty good.
I think it's nice to be able to see who has signed up when you sign up.
Yeah, I agree.
We don't have the names of who signs up. I don't think. There's just, we know how many people have signed up, but I don't think we see the names of.
I can see the name. Jim can see the name.
Oh, you can? Oh.
If you ever want to know, it's easy to show.
I'll ask, see if my friends come, yeah. Which mass they're going to be at.
Right. How far in advance can people sign up, Jim?
Well, once one is established, we have the link for it to sign up.
Like if I wanted to go to Mass in March, could I?
You mean for Mass?
Like Ash Wednesday.
Yeah, we tend to run our Mass sign up reaching up no more than a month. Because if it goes more than that, people are just guessing.
Oh, it's really out. Lots of leeway.
Yeah, and if you can see all the names, it makes it very hard to scroll down to the service you're looking for because you have to scroll so far. So those who I usually turn that feature off even when I'm looking at it because it makes it so hard to look at. But yeah, the parish has access to who signed up for Mass. I thought you were asking about signing up for a Zoom meeting. First answer. Sorry.
Do you, at Corp, is there a program going on called Better Men's Outreach?
Yes. Yep.
Do you have that?
Yep, we do.
I went to that a few times at the St. Cecilia Church, St. Charles Lawanga, when I was down in Detroit at Sacred Heart. So that was cool. And I thought I remember that they had different locations. I was wondering if one of them was there.
Yeah, actually, we started it off over at at then St. Gerard's Parish, but it started back in 2008 under the retired Father Donald Archambault, who's another one of the nonprofits that he started, and an incredible program, man. We've seen over 1,100 young men come through there whose lives have been changed and or touched in a positive way. And then the founders, started to separate, not in a bad way, but just to kind of expand the program. And St. Cecilia was actually the second site after St. John Bosco. They used the rec center over in Brightmoor. And so St. Cecilia was the second church. They're now also at Jesu as well. So trying to hit all the corners as much as they possibly
Cool.
What's that program called?
It's called Better Men's Outreach.
Oh, great.
And they
Jesu parish growing up. I love that parish.
I don't know what the test is that they learned that they study to prepare for to take, so that they can get it into the trades jobs. That once they complete that test, they can automatically pretty much have a job in whatever field, like an electrician or plumber or something. So that was cool. And then they play basketball too. So.
Yeah, the premise of it is that in the city of Detroit, our gyms are our meccas. It's a great and easier opportunity to get young men, especially young men of color, united and kind of off the streets and doing things. So the premise is an hour of basketball and then an hour of reflection and or job development or job search skills or just simple motivation, just men kicking it and talking it. I mean, that's part of this whole thing. And then another hour of basketball. So you get the smart guys that come in like right either to play ball and then have an excuse to leave, or they come in right after the hour session. So they have to sign an agreement that really says they will be there for the entire, unless there's an emergency, obviously, but we had to hold them to something. So figuring putting the basketball, the reflection in the middle is the best time to do it. It's worked. I have to say it's worked.
Father Don was very active in community programs.
Yeah.
And Father John did sign up for the webinar, so when he shows up, we can see if he wants to join the panelists and say something to the crew.
And he still is. He's still very active doing community work because he really loved to do that. So he's really only kind of semi-retired, I guess.
Oh, it's good.
Oh, don't tell the Archdiocese that, though.
I'm not allowed to talk to the Archdiocese anymore because now I'm in Lansing. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, he's really enjoying retirement.
He deserved it.
Oh, he sure did. Yeah. I felt the Archdiocese should have capitalized on his success on combining churches and making everybody feel welcome. And they, because he sure did, he did that quite a few times.
Yeah.
Oh, he was able to do that pretty effectively.
Yep.
Yes. It really was a good model that, to my knowledge, the Archdiocese never saw fit to incorporate and standardize. Often people just left on their own, or there's strange combinations of churches that were combined together that culturally were very, very different from each other. And of course, Corpus Christi benefited from one of those. We got a lot of really good people
Oh, yeah.
who fled a place that didn't quite fit them. Okay, I'll stop. Okay. I shouldn't be talking. I just got smacked by my wife.
Well, that kind of reminded me that the story in Deacon Alex's book about his community being assigned to, I forget the name of the church they were assigned to, but it was, a very white Polish church. It didn't work out that great. I mean, it was a hard cultural fit, is what my impression was.
So for the sake of the 20 people that are among the attendees, I'll mention that when we get into the presentation, most of us here will turn off our cameras and you'll be watching Yolanda, who's doing the presentation. If you happen to be using a phone rather than a computer screen, you can only see a small number of people at a time. So right now, while there are 11 of us on the computer screen, on your phone, if you swipe sideways, you'll see a different selection of people. So by swiping sideways, you can scroll among the different people whose pictures are in the meeting. I'm the technologist here, so it's my job to mention a few things like that.
Thank you.
Thank goodness we have Jim. I don't know what we would do without you.
I am going to be right back. I want to grab something.
Hello, everyone.
Very good, Yolanda. We'll see you in 5.
Warren.
How are you? How's everybody?
Hello, Warren.
Do you have the grandbaby today?
He's in the other room. He's always here.
Oh, such a cutie.
Great. Oh, let's see. Wow, look. Kathy's here, John Mueller.
Great.
Oh my gosh, look at Rita. Hey, Rita.
Great.
Yeah.
Where do you see the list of participants?
So there's a tab.
Is that on the bottom there?
Yeah, it's on the bottom. And then you can choose between panelists or attendees.
Cool.
Oh,
I heard from Mary Davis this morning too. She texted to wish us all well with the presentation, and she said she's hoping it's recorded so she can watch it later, but she doesn't have internet, so she can't join us.
Oh, that's too bad.
Yeah, she's feeling better though. That's good.
Oh,
I noticed that Andrea Elliott raised her hand. Andrea, if you'd like to speak, you can turn your mic on now and say hello to the panelists.
I think it's on. Can you hear me?
Sure.
Can hear you.
Yes.
Okay, I didn't see my picture, so I didn't know whether I was actually on or not. So I just wanted to check.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll put your hand down because we know if you need to speak again, you raise your hand to get my attention, and then I enable your microphone.
Okay.
I want to welcome Gloria Flagg. I see Gloria has called in on a telephone line, and so I just named Gloria so that she's not just a number, a phone number, but a name. So welcome. If at any point you want to speak, you can ask to be our, I suppose.
So while we're close enough to the appropriate time, would one of our clergy like to say a prayer to begin our day together?
We do have Curtis saying a prayer too, so
okay. Well,
maybe we can. I'm sure he's got something wonderful to share with us.
Okay.
Scheduled at 1 o'clock, right?
Hmm?
Curtis's prayer is scheduled at 1 o'clock?
No, it would be after 1:30, which is the official starting time.
I mean 1:30, yes.
1:30, yeah.
I was gonna say that's back in time, but
Yeah. So we're still in the pre-meeting time right now, where we're informal conversation.
Yeah. So
Father, you want to take the prayer?
I'll take care of a couple of housekeeping items, and then Curtis will be leading us in a prayer after that.
Okay.
How many people here actually went to a real in-person mass? I'm curious. Did anyone watch mass online? Yeah, Father John was in person.
Not today.
My family was happy to be able to be there in person. Yeah.
I was thinking when I woke up and saw how nice it was, that usually when we get our parishes together in person, it's like the worst day of the year. It's always a snowstorm or ice. And then today it's beautiful because, you know, we're just gathering virtually.
Yeah.
It's the way it always goes.
I'm missing all of Dick's quotes, his posters of Martin Luther King.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's too bad we don't have that this year.
Yeah.
Sure hope for next year.
Yeah, that was a great tour last year. At the
Mhm.
museum.
No Michelle, no Greg Pope, no, oh goodness. None of our old buddies. I hope they're here for the meeting, for Yolanda's speech.
It's like we have about 28 attendees in addition to the 12 panelists on the screen. So we want to welcome them.
Okay.
I'm very
Jeff Smale, did you have a comment?
Oh, I was just wondering, I had gotten in late, my apologies, and I could see everybody, but I couldn't see myself. I was just wondering if I was in.
You're in.
Thank you.
Welcome,
Yeah,
Jeff.
glad you're here.
Yeah, I think our Brady Bunch panels would be a little too much if we had everybody viewable at this point. So we have to do it in presentation mode.
Yeah.
So do we want to get started right away, or do you want to give a couple more minutes for folks to arrive? What are we thinking?
Looks like it's 1:30.
Yeah.
Time for Curtis, huh?
Okay, well, I'll start out actually because I want to give it a quick overview of the agenda and explain how to ask questions. Welcome, everybody. I'm Kelly Gothier, the co-chair of the St. Francis Life, Peace, and Justice Committee. And for those of you who don't know, Corpus Christi Parish in Detroit and St. Francis Parish in Ann Arbor are actually sister parishes, and we've been doing lots and lots of projects together over the years. So this is our latest effort. We're glad you can join us. Quick overview of the agenda. After I speak briefly here, Curtis Simpson, the Director of Christian Service at Corpus Christi, is going to lead us in a prayer before we introduce the speaker and get going.
Excuse me, Kelly. At this point, since we are beginning, I'm going to ask panelists other than the ones who are speaking or who will be speaking within seconds to turn off their cameras so that the people watching on a cell phone will only see one or two people, ideally.
Yeah, and mute yourselves as well. That's a good point, Jim. Thanks. So the presentation is going to be about 90 minutes. We plan on taking a real quick break, like a 5-minute bio break about halfway through. So you can plan on that if you want to go get water or tea or something. And if you're wondering why you can't see or hear yourselves, it's because we're in presentation mode. So the only people you're going to see are the presenters, and everybody will be muted. But we do want to take your questions as we go along. So if you look down at the bottom of the screen, kind of hover your mouse over there, you'll see a button that says Q&A. Although I think on some phones it might be in the top part of the screen. But if you click on that Q&A button, it'll open a chat window, and then you can type in your question, and we'll go along periodically and stop and address questions as we go. We are hoping to have some time at the end when we can unmute people and have some more discussion and kind of back and forth stuff. But for the presentation, we're keeping everybody muted just because of the background noise and interference. I think that was about it for me. So I'm going to go ahead and shut off my camera and turn it over to Curtis so that he can lead us in a prayer this morning. Hi, Curtis.
Well, before I begin in prayer, everybody, I just want to say good afternoon and welcome to all of our panelists and all of our attendees for making this day an extremely blessed day that we get an opportunity to learn from a very, very educated, blessed woman who is going to take us through learning about Dr. Martin Luther King, but on a different type of a level. We know about the wonderful speeches and how he impacted the world and how he was Holy Spirit led, and everything that he did was for him to be placed on mission. And I know that we're at a critical time in our church and we're at a critical time in our life. But the question is, how do we get to this point? And so just to recap, and thank you, Kelly, for saying that. The recap is, we started with about a year and a half ago, we started with taking a knee, and we had a presentation at our church where we invited a very powerful speaker, Dr. Michael Moore, to come out and talk about Colin Kaepernick and what he did to stand in the face of losing his career, but to make to make knowledge, to make open about the injustices that have been going on in our society and our world. These are acts of love and kindness that was reflected in somewhat of a bad way, but we tried to bring a different light. And the second thing was the Open Wide Our Hearts with the Society of St. Vincent de Paul of Corpus Christi Parish in November, where again, we were highlighting the injustices and talking about some of the political things that are going on in our society and our world. How can we be a people of God that are not maintenance oriented, but mission oriented? And you'll hear me say that a few more times. And then the big thing was last year before the pandemic, is when both of our churches got together, St. Francis Assisi of Ann Arbor and also Corpus Christi Parish. We did a pilgrimage in the city of Detroit, where we again opened up, first of all, in the Spirit of God, and then we had a wonderful time at Charles Wright Museum, where we learned a lot about our histories. And some of these conversations and things have to be uncomfortable. And if you know me, I'll speak to that we have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. Sometimes you have to ask the question. The only way you can get to know a person is if you go where they are. And so these are opportunities for us to get together in a very, very calm, comfortable environment. But I want you to voice your opinions and concerns and be honest and real, because the only way we can really make change is if we're honest with ourselves. The people that you look at every day when you brush your teeth, I hope you brush your teeth. That was a joke. I didn't hear any drums. Anyway, but when we look at ourselves in the mirror, who are we? What do we want to be, and what are we doing for the kingdom of God? So I'm going to, if I can find it, actually take this prayer. Usually I like to do a lot of spirit-led prayers, but this prayer was adapted from Sister Joan, who is a Benedictine sister of Erie. And so I'm just going to read it per verbatim. So if we were all together, I would ask that we hold hands, but I'll ask that you bow and take your hats off and allow the Holy Spirit to enter into this circle. The prayer is entitled, family, A Prayer for Peace. Great God, who has told us, vengeance is mine, save us from ourselves. Save us from the vengeance in our hearts and the acid in our souls. Save us from desire to hurt as we have been hurt, to punish as we have been punished, to terrorize as we have been terrorized. Give us the strength it takes to listen rather than to judge, to trust rather than to fear, to try again and again, to make peace even when peace eludes us. We ask, Almighty Father, for the grace to be our best selves. We ask for the vision to be builders of the human community rather than its destroyers. We ask for the humility as a people to understand the fears and hopes of other peoples. We ask for the love it takes to bequeath to the children of the world to come more than the failures of our own making. We ask you, mighty Father, for the heart that it takes to care for all the peoples of our world, as well as for ourselves. Give us in the depth of our soul, oh God, to constrain our might, to resist the temptations of power, to refuse to attack the attackable, to understand that vengeance begets violence, and to bring peace, not war, wherever we go. For you, oh God, have been merciful to us. For you, oh God, have been patient with us. For you, oh God, have been gracious to us. And so may we also, Lord, be merciful and patient and gracious and trusting with these others whom you also love. This family we ask in the name of Jesus, the one without any vengeance in his heart. We ask this forever and ever. Let the church say amen. I'd like to pass the mic or the baton to Sister Cheryl Hill, who will introduce our wonderful speaker for the day. Enjoy the day, family.
Good afternoon, everyone. Our guest speaker today is Yolanda Jack. She is the Youth Program Coordinator and an educator at the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History in Detroit. She is also an actress, stage manager, and director of theater. A native Detroiter, Yolanda lived 10 years on the East Coast, but returned to begin and raise a family, as well as to found One World Theater Company with her husband, Philip Jack. Enjoy the presentation. Yolanda?
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, everybody. Hello and greetings to you all. I'm gonna put my glasses on so I can see my notes in the screen here. So really thank you all to everyone. And I'm really gonna just jump right in and begin my presentation. So I will share my screen. And we will begin. So as the first the slide here says, welcome to you. I feel certainly very welcomed by everybody. I am very excited to be here. I think that this event, this activity is beautiful. The fact that there are two parishes coming together and the fact that there's so many people from across this community, our community, this home of Michigan we call home. I'm just really happy, and it's appropriate that all of the words that have been said thus far have been said, because the beautiful prayer, thank you, Brother Curtis, that the sister gave to us for you to offer was absolutely in line with what Dr. King and what I think you'll hear from me. So again, good afternoon and welcome to everybody who decided to come in. And we're gonna learn and think and talk a little bit about Dr. King and his pilgrimage to nonviolence. And so I bring greetings to you from the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History, from the Department of Education where I work, as well as all of my colleagues. We all say hello. And I expect some of you all may remember Jonathan, my colleague, who remembers many of you when I mentioned that I'm doing a presentation. He's like, oh, say hello. So greetings, especially from Jonathan as well. So yes, today we are here to consider, as I said, Dr. King's pilgrimage to nonviolence. And it indeed was, in fact, a pilgrimage that tested Dr. King and prepared him to be the man that we know him now to be. And so before we get too far into it, I do want to lay some kind of ground definitions, some backstop so that we all have the same understanding of what we mean, what I mean when I speak about these different terms. For example, most often when we think about nonviolence, very often we think just simply lack of violence. I don't hit you, I don't shoot you, these types of things. I don't actually cause you physical. Well, that's true, yes, that's part of it. But Dr. King took that hyphen out and made the word nonviolence. And so there's a whole concept, the love-centered way, he says, of thinking, speaking, and acting that leads to personal, cultural, and societal transformation. This definition I learned from the King Center in Atlanta when I went a few years ago to receive a beautiful and a wonderful training, which a lot of my information that I give to you is based on. The King Center gives this training. It's called the Nonviolence 365. And you can go to their website. I will be happy to share it with you in the chat later at the end of the program, but they are awesome, awesome, awesome organization. But at any rate, nonviolence, a love-centered way of thinking, speaking, and acting that leads to personal, cultural, and societal transformation. And so that's really what we're talking about. And the question often that people asked then, and I think even still now, is why choose nonviolence, to what end? And Dr. King answers that in his writing, The Role of the Church in Facing the Nation's Chief Moral Dilemma. And he wrote this in 1957. But in the end is reconciliation. The end is redemption. The end is the creation of the beloved community. It is this type of spirit and this type of love that can transform opposers into friends. The type of love that I stress here is not eros, a sort of aesthetic or a romantic love, not philia, a sort of reciprocal love between personal friends, but it is agape, which is universe, understanding, goodwill for all men. It is an overflowing love which seeks nothing in return. It is the love of God working in the lives of men. This is the love that may well be the salvation of our civilization. So this is what Dr. King really laid it out for. This is what he was working towards, that understanding of this concept of the beloved community. Here we see Dr. King playing with his two daughters, Yolanda, you see her back to us, and he's raising this now CEO of the King Center, Bernice A. King. And he envisioned this beloved community, and the King Center defines it, and he defined it, and the King Center highlights it as a global vision in which all people can share in the wealth of the earth. In the beloved community, poverty, hunger, and homelessness will not be tolerated because international standards of human decency will not allow it. Racism and all forms of discrimination, bigotry, and prejudice will be replaced by an all-inclusive spirit of sisterhood and brotherhood. In the beloved community, international disputes will be resolved by peaceful conflict resolution and reconciliation of adversaries instead of military power. Love and trust will triumph over fear and hatred. Peace with justice will prevail over war and military conflict. Many scoffed then and still do at the possibility of such a utopia, right? Saying it was naive to consider such an idea. But Dr. King, I don't think was naive at all. And I think that he was really fervent in his convictions, and we'll see and you'll hear in his writings and in his sermons that it was not just a small thing to him. This idea wasn't begun by him, nor was it limited to him. People had agreed to it before him and aligned with this when they heard him vocalize it the way he did. People gravitated. This is why his teachers are still so important. And his wife, his widow, Mrs. Coretta Scott King, kind of focuses that concept of the beloved community, and I think begins to explain it better, I think, or more clearly, and lays the challenge down very clearly when she says, to me, the beloved community is a realistic vision of an achievable society, one in which problems and conflicts exist, but are resolved peacefully and without bitterness. In the beloved community, caring and compassion drive political policies that support the elimination of poverty and hunger and all forms of bigotry and violence. The beloved community is a state of heart and mind, a spirit of hope and goodwill that transcends all boundaries and barriers and embraces all creation. At its core, the beloved community is an engine of reconciliation. This way of living seems a long way from the kind of world we have now, but I do believe it is a goal that can be accomplished through courage and determination, and education and training if enough people are willing to make the necessary commitment. So we see an image down in Atlanta in one of the galleries there, and the idea of this beloved community coming together, people from all over the world visiting, languages, you see different languages, all of it in this concept. But the main word that we see, I think, that jumps out to me certainly, justice, and that's the basis of the beloved community. And where do we have this beloved community? How do we experience it? Is it just in our cities? Is it just in our homes? And Dr. King responds to this as well in the world house concept. This is the great new problem of mankind, he says. We have inherited a large house, a great world house in which we have to live together, Black and white, Easterner and Westerner, Gentile and Jew, Catholic and Protestant, Muslim and Hindu, a family unduly separated in ideas, culture, and interests, who, because we can never again live apart, must somehow learn how to live with each other in peace. I needed that water. Whew. But in it, he explains not just the concept of the beloved community, but how we are really right now. The fact that on this planet, we realize, and I think he even realized during his lifetime, as technology made the world much closer, the development of telephones and the use of telegraphic communication and just transportation, everything made the world much closer in his lifetime, as it certainly does the same thing here in our lifetimes. We've gone from, you know, I've seen technology where we had no internet to now we literally are on the internet communicating because of this pandemic. The world is closer and closer and closer, and we can never again live apart. So we have to learn how, somehow, a way to communicate and live with each other, being on this planet in a just way. And this is the world house, and we must find a way to develop this beloved community. He started thinking about it, obviously, in terms of the race relations, Black and white. But he extended it to all of humanity. And during his lifetime, as I said, this world got much closer as it has in our world. And he cautioned us about developing the sciences and technology without deepening humanity's moral and spiritual influences, because these spiritual and moral influences can now temper the technological or scientific influences. We need both, but they need to temper each other. I think especially because this was so real to him, because he watched the development of the atomic bomb and lived in, at that time, many of you may even remember the fear and the hysteria. And his voice was one of the few voices calling out, not only just for an end to the Vietnam War, but all wars globally. So this idea of the implements of war and no matter how you develop war, no matter how you do war, is going to be very deadly. But he just really understood that no matter what, you can do some wars. We thought about World War II, stopping totalitarianism, et cetera. That might have been a good war, a bad war for a good reason he spoke about. But he really just got away from all wars altogether, particularly as these developments of weaponry. Just realized that annihilation, the potential annihilation of the planet, of humanity on this planet. And so even though the US has never not been hawkish really about war, anybody, even Dr. King then and anybody even now, could be labeled with many different unkind things when they talk about peace, or they're considered from the fringe or from, you know, some strange world, crazy other place. They're not from this world, but that's what Dr. King was really looking for. And so before we get too far off into all of these other concepts, I will go back to talking about Dr. King specifically. And so we'll talk a little bit about his biographical information. I won't give a lot in terms of his childhood and his upbringing, but we will go straight to his scholastic achievement and his work, which is what did how he became who he is today. And so I will not attempt to imitate Dr. King when I read his writings. I will not insult you or him in that activity, but I will read his words, and because I want them to take the center. I want you all to hear not only the beauty and power of what he was saying, but just how you can see how much of what you'll hear about in terms of his study really reflected and became a part of who he was and what he did. So just jumping right on in. Dr. King was born January 15th. Many people celebrated his birthday on Friday in 1929. Tomorrow, of course, we celebrate it internationally. And he grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, despising not only segregation, but also the oppressive and barbarous acts that grew out of segregation and the racism. He had passed spots in his home, in his hometown, where Blacks had been lynched. And he had seen the Ku Klux Klan on their rides at night. He had seen police brutality with his own eyes. And in a beautiful moment where brutality was resisted by his father, he had been pulled over. Dr. King's father had been pulled over with him in the passenger seat, and the police officer called him a boy. And before Dr. King's father responded and complied to give him the license and all of that, he told the officer, "That's a boy, I'm a man." And what a powerful, powerful moment that probably was to a young boy, seeing his father be a man in a nonviolent, but I'm here. This is who I am. And so he watched this kind of brutal behavior and seeing in the court system how tragically Blacks had been treated and the injustices they had found there. All of these things did something, he says, to his growing personality. In fact, he says that it even made him grow perilously close to hatred of all white people. But he was the child of one minister and the grandchild of another minister, and that strong Christian upbringing in his family wouldn't allow him to go that far into hatred. And he wanted, and he understood the impact that it had on him, that Christian love, but he wanted to find a way to kind of not just have that personal impact, but use that kind of spirit and energy to make a real societal change. But he, at that point, as a child and as a young man, really wasn't sure how. And then he goes off to Morehouse. In 1944, at 15 years old, Dr. King, or the man who would become Dr. King, follows in his father's and his maternal grandfather's footsteps in going to Morehouse College in Atlanta. In 1944, World War II was going on, and the student body, as you can imagine, of a student body of all men and men who have been drafted to the war, signed up to go to the war, was very small on Morehouse's campus. So in order to keep the body up and the campus robust, the Morehouse leadership decided to invite juniors of high schools that were that had passed the test. If they passed this admittance test or this bar level test, they would be able to go to the school. And Dr. King, at 15 years old, took the test and passed it and became a student at that time. And when he entered Morehouse, his concern then was already established. You can imagine growing up, the world that he'd grown up in, the concern for racial and economic justice and power, equality was very important already. And while he was there, he was exposed to things like, for example, Thoreau's essay on civil disobedience. He says he read it there for the first time. In preparing for this presentation, not only this time, but in previous iterations, I tried to read this essay. It is not easy reading. Many of you may have already read it and are able to decipher it. I got through it, but it was tough. And this, though, set him on that course. And while at Morehouse, he continued to be influenced by important readings and even mentors, the president of Morehouse at the time. And he graduated from Morehouse with a BA in sociology. And I just want to pause just a moment and just speak to the importance of historically Black colleges and universities in the United States, the influence that they have had on people of African descent, gaining education, having access to education, and not only education, but opportunities with that education. Obviously, Dr. King, myself, I went to Howard University in my first foray into undergraduate work. But also you have people like our Vice President, Kamala Harris, who went to Howard University. So these beautiful institutions, these places that would allow and encourage and stimulate, somebody's mic. These places would be very important and still, as I can imagine, will for a long time be influential, if not because of Dr. King, certainly because of Kamala. After he left Morehouse, Dr. King attended Crozier Theological Seminary, and he says that this is where his scholastic achievement exploded. He read everything and everybody in terms of philosophers and social theorists and just religious writers of that time and of the previous ancient as well as modern era. He just read everything, including Rauschenbusch, philosophers, obviously Plato, Aristotle, Rousseau, Hobbes, Bentham, Mills, Locke. And he says that all of these masters stimulated his thinking such that it was. And while he found things, he says, to question in each of them, he nevertheless learned a great deal from studying them. And he read so very much. And he mentions during the Christmas holidays of 1949, during his spare time of the holidays, he decided to read Karl Marx in order to understand the appeal communism had and was becoming to have over so many people, especially here in the United States. During his stay at Crozier, he says that he was exposed for the first time to the pacifist position. He says he was deeply moved, but far from convinced of the practicability of the position of being a pacifist. That whole idea of just, doing nothing or laying down, it didn't appeal to his sensibility at all. And during this period of study at Crozier, he really being so deeply in terms of reading these different philosophers and theorists and writers, he says he despaired of the power of love in solving social problems. He says that his faith was temporarily shaken, perhaps, by the philosophy of Nietzsche, who at that time, Dr. King had been reading parts of the genealogy of morals, and he had read the entirety of The Will to Power. So that just really probably really impacted him and shook, I think, something that he had held very closely and intimately. Then on one Sunday afternoon, he travels to Philadelphia to hear a sermon by Dr. Mordecai Johnson, who at that time was the president of my alma mater, Howard University. Dr. Johnson had just returned at that time from a trip to India. And Dr. King says, and to my great interest, he spoke of the life and teachings of Mahatma Gandhi. His message was so profound and electrifying that I left the meeting and bought half a dozen books on Gandhi's life and works. So this understanding, or what Dr. Mordecai Johnson mentioned in terms of what Gandhi had done, lit something in Dr. King, and it was a very important igniting. It was the influence of this whole concept, the Sanskrit word, satyagraha. This is the thing that Dr. King, I think, this force that the Gandhi used, it was a language that was normal, of course, to Gandhi, but this idea of satya, which truth can be equated as love, they say, the translation says, and agraha is force. So it really is like truth force or love force. And this is what Gandhi did in a lot of his principles in terms of the resistance that he had and the way that he really wanted the country, his people, to move as beings together, was this satyagraha, this love force, this truth force. And this is what profoundly impacted and was significant to Dr. King. He delved deeper and deeper into the philosophy of Gandhi. And as he did so, the skepticism that had developed as the result of the reading of all of these other philosophers and theorists and writers, etc., that skepticism concerning the power of love, he says, gradually diminished. And he came to see for the first time the potency in the area that this love force had in the area of social reform. Dr. King mentions in one of his writings that true pacifism is not unrealistic submission to evil power as Neighbor contends. It is rather a courageous confrontation of evil by the power of love in the faith that it is better to be the recipient of violence than the inflictor of it, since the latter only multiplies the existence of violence and bitterness in the universe, while the former may develop a sense of shame in the opponent and thereby bring about a transformation and a change of heart. And so this idea of just being a lay down kind of pacifist, nah, I'm gonna stand here and force you to inflict this. And even while you do so, you may find that this is harmful and you may transform and you may decide, I'm not gonna do this anymore. That's the kind of power of that truth force, that love force of Dr. King wanted to engage. And as you can imagine, as you see the images here, this is what was needed. The stakes were high. People were being lynched and killed and being missing. And it was a horrifying, horrible existence as a person of African descent, especially in the South, but across the United States, not just in the South. But Dr. King knew that the importance of this satyagraha was what was going to change the tide for people who were being oppressed in the United States. He says, I studied philosophy and theology at Boston University under Doctors Edgar S. Brightman and L. Harold DeWolf. Both men greatly stimulated my thinking. It was mainly under these teachings that I studied personalistic philosophy, the theory that the clue to the meaning of ultimate reality is found in personality. This personal idealism remains today my basic philosophical position. Dr. King was basically saying that through personhood, through myself, my personality, my knowing who I am, my understanding my existence, that is what is the center of my experience. And that's how I begin to relate to the world. And if I relate to myself as whole and complete, then I also can relate to you. Then I expect that same in reciprocity. So that was what was really being dealt with in terms of personalism for Dr. King. And he goes on to say, just before Dr. Brightman's death, I began studying the philosophy of Hegel with him. Although the course was mainly a study of Hegel's major work, Phenomenology of Mind, I spent my spare time, Dr. King's spare time, reading philosophy of history and philosophy of right. There were points in Hegel's philosophy that he strongly disagreed with, he says. We see him kneeling here with Ralph Abernathy, Reverend Abernathy and others before they are on their way to go to jail. But there were other aspects, he says, of Hegel's thinking that he found stimulating. The contention, Hegel's contention that truth is the whole, led Dr. King to a philosophical method of rational coherence. He says Hegel's analysis of the dialectical process, in spite of its shortcomings, helped me to see that growth comes through struggle. This understanding of these two opposing forces against each other, this is where the growth happens. But we must find a way to do it non-violently. We must find a way to have these opposing forces. That's going to happen, fine, but use that force to not destroy or tear down the other, but grow forward. That's where the growth comes. And so he says, in 1954, I ended my formal training with all of these relatively divergent intellectual forces converging into a positive social philosophy. One of the main tenets of this philosophy was the conviction that nonviolent resistance was one of the most potent weapons available to oppressed people in their quest for social justice. At this time, however, I had merely an intellectual understanding and appreciation of the position, with no firm determination to organize it into a socially effective situation. Dr. King was saying here, he wasn't intending, he did not plan to be this activist, this leader that we know him to become. He was going to seminary, he's going to become a minister. That was what he intended to do. In fact, that's what he had been at that time, even while he was in studies at Boston, and even at Crozier, he was pastoring or helping out, assisting pastoring at churches here and there. His father had set up for him through the networks, of course, established by that Morehouse connection and through the connections of the clergy. So he was really just trying to think about a way to do it and talk about these theories and these ideas with his congregation. He was not intending to put it into action. But when he arrived in Montgomery, not long after he completed his studies, before he even completed his studies, he was called by Dexter Avenue Baptist Church to become the pastor there. And soon after he got to Dexter Avenue Church, he completed his divinity degree. And then about a year later, he says he was asked to lead this Montgomery bus boycott that we now know, this legendary event. But he had no intention when he completed school to put this into action. This was the opportunity, though, for it to go into action. We see him here in 1966 in Atlanta at an advisory planning meeting. He says about Montgomery, as the days unfolded, I came to see the power of nonviolence more and more. Living through the actual experience of the protests, nonviolence became more than a method to which I gave intellectual assent. It became a commitment to a way of life. Many of the things that I had not cleared up intellectually concerning nonviolence were now solved in the sphere of practical action. So even to his own admittment, he's saying, I wasn't intending to do it, and I hadn't even figured out all of it, but the doing of it, the actual practice of these things that he began to codify in terms of this love force, this truth force, this nonviolence, this nonviolent resistance. I will not give harm to you, even though you do harm to me. I realized that this, I'll get to it in a second. I don't want to jump too far ahead. So how's everybody doing? Do we need to take a break or anything? We're about a half an hour in, and I'm going to get ready to go into the principles. There are 6 principles of nonviolence, and there's some significant readings there. So I'm trying to, I don't know if we'll be able to take a break right in an hour or not, but I'm trying to time it so that people, if there's questions or anything like that. So if, I'm going to just put it out there. Are there questions or anything that we might want to add, or is there anything?
There are no questions in the Q&A at the moment. How long will the next section be? I'm thinking maybe we'd go through that section and then take a break if the timing would work okay.
The next section will, by the time we complete the next section, it'll be time for a break.
Okay, and I'm sure you could use a second to rest.
Yeah, that water break. Yeah, try not to take too many water sips, but it's important.
No, it's great. We understand. Very interesting stuff. So,
you know, it was really I wanted to say this because when I was creating this presentation, when I was thinking about you guys, when I was thinking about what Dr. King was saying, it became important, more and more important to me, because I was going to attempt to just weave in segments and kind of snippets of his writing, but you'll see, and I still did curate this that I will read to you. Most of it is curated. However, it is great passages because his writing was so beautiful and so concise, and he really explained himself so well that there's no real need for interpretation. I think though that the reading though of this will underscore and underline how intently he meant and how he intended these principles to be used and utilized. So I'll just jump right into it. But before, we're talking about love force, the idea of love force. And when I was looking through the images and selecting the images for this presentation, this one particularly jumped out to me when I was thinking about love force. This young woman, her name is Dorinda Palmer. She's 16 years old, leading marchers to City Hall. This is, I believe, in Montgomery or Selma. I'm sorry, I don't remember now. But she was blocked by the white sheriff's deputies and the KKK members. You can see that the idea of love force, these men and women whose backs we see, I don't know, for some reason, just love force just spoke to me there. And maybe I think you all hear or see what I'm talking about. So we'll jump right on into the 6 principles of nonviolence. The first principle, nonviolence is a way of life for courageous people. It is not a method for cowards. It is active nonviolence, resistance to evil. It is aggressive spiritually, mentally, and emotionally. And this is not some easy and light kind of thing. And so I'm going to read to you all a segment of Dr. King's sermon, Tender Heart, Tough Mind and a Tender Heart. To help illustrate, I believe, how he feels about these 2 principles. Principle 1 here, nonviolence is a way of life for courageous people. And then principle 2, nonviolence seeks to win friendship and understanding. The end result of nonviolence is redemption and reconciliation. Reconciliation, the beloved community. The whole idea, everything goes back to reconciliation and the beloved community. That is everything I think that Dr. King was thinking about. And so I'd like to read from his sermon, as I said here. Tough Mind and a Tender Heart. And he begins, A French philosopher said, "No man is strong unless he bears within his character antitheses strongly marked. A strong man holds in a living blend strongly marked opposites." Now, ordinarily do men achieve this balance of opposites. The idealists are not usually realistic, and the realists are not usually idealistic. The militant are not generally known to be passive, nor the passive to be militant. Seldom are the humble self-assertive or the self-assertive humble. But life at its best is a creative synthesis of opposites in fruitful harmony. The philosopher Hegel said that truth is found neither in the thesis nor the antithesis, but in the emergent synthesis which reconciles the two. Jesus recognized the need for blending opposites. He knew that his disciples would face a difficult and hostile world where they would confront the recalcitrance of political officials and the intransigence of protectors of the old order. He knew that they would meet cold and arrogant men whose hearts had been hardened by the long winter of traditionalism. So he said to them, "Behold, I send you forth as sheep in the midst of wolves." And he gave them a formula for action. "Be ye therefore wise as serpents and harmless as doves." It is pretty difficult to imagine a single person having simultaneously the characteristics of the serpent and the dove, but this is what Jesus expects. We must combine the toughness of the serpent and the softness of the dove, a tough mind and a tender heart. Let us consider first the need for a tough mind, characterized by incisive thinking, realistic appraisal, decisive judgment. The tough mind is sharp and penetrating, breaking through the crust of legends and myths and sifting the true from the false. The tough-minded individual is astute and discerning. He has a strong, austere quality that makes for firmness of purpose and solidness of commitment. Rarely do we find men who willingly engage in hard, solid thinking. There is an almost universal quest for easy answers and half-baked solutions. Nothing pains some people more than having to think. And then he says, but few people realize that even our authentic channels of information, the press, the platform, and in many instances, the pulpit, do not give us objective and unbiased truth. Few people have the toughness of mind to judge critically and to discern the truth from the false, the fact from the fiction. Our minds are constantly being invaded by legions of half-truths, prejudice, and false facts. One of the great needs of mankind is to be lifted above the morass of false propaganda. I feel like he wrote this in 2020, 2021, or in the past anything, not in the 1960s. He goes on to say, he gives an example about the tough mind and this soft-mindedness versus the how people need to be tough-mindedness, that there's a gullibility of people. And he relates the example this way. He says that he was in an elevator in a large hotel in New York City, and he noticed for the first time that the listing of the numbers skipped number 13. And he asked the elevator operator about it, and the operator explained to him that, you know, people don't like staying on the 13th floor. People are afraid of the number 13, so, you know, they don't have the 13th floor there. But the elevator operator goes on and he laughs. He said, well, the foolish thing is anybody who gets on the 13th floor or the 14th floor, because they may think it's the 14th floor, is really the 13th floor. And if they're afraid of the 13th floor, God forbid that they actually stay on the 14th floor. And so Dr. King went on to say that soft-minded people, this gullible, they're not willing to accept the reality. They're not penetrating, they're not this tough-mindedness, and they also fear change and are terrified by the new. He was saying that soft-minded people would cooperate with oppression, would would rather deal with oppression and yield to it rather than seek to end it. You cannot be courageous and yielding to oppression. This is not the way of nonviolence. And this is one way that he said of dealing with race issues, this way of yielding to the oppression. Dr. King goes on to say that, but we must not stop with the cultivation of the mind. The gospel also demands a tender heart. Tough-mindedness without tender-heartedness is cold and detached, leaving one's life in a perpetual winter devoid of the warmth of spring and the gentle heat of summer. What is more tragic than to see a person who has risen to the discipline and heights of tough-mindedness, but has at the same time sunk to the passionless depths of hard-heartedness? The hard-hearted person never truly loves. He engages in a crass utilitarianism which values other people mainly according to their usefulness to him. The hard-hearted person lacks the capacity for genuine compassion. He gives dollars to a worthwhile charity, but he does not give of the Spirit. Jesus reminds us that the good life combines the toughness of the serpent and the tenderness of the dove. To have serpent-like qualities devoid of dove-like qualities is to be passionless, mean, and selfish. To have dove-like qualities without serpent-like qualities is to be sentimental, anemic, and aimless. We must combine strongly marked antitheses. And there are hard-hearted and bitter individuals among us who will combat the opponent with violence, physical violence, and corroding hatred. So it's like there's people who want to yield to the oppression, but then there's also people who are just all hard-hearted. They just want to go violent. And violence brings only temporary victories. Violence, by creating many more social problems than it solves, it never brings a permanent peace. I am convinced that if we succumb to the temptation to use violence in our struggle for freedom, unborn generations will be the recipients of a long and desolate night of bitterness, and our chief legacy to them will be a never-ending reign of chaos. A voice echoing through the corridors of time says to the ever-intemperate Peter, "Put up thy sword." History is cluttered with the wreckage of nations that failed to follow Christ's command. So Dr. King says a third way open for our quest for freedom, namely nonviolent resistance, that combines tough-mindedness and tender-heartedness and avoids the complacency and do-nothingness of the soft-minded and the violence and bitterness of the hard-hearted. My belief is that this method must guide our action in this present crisis of race relations. Through nonviolent resistance, we shall be able to oppose the unjust system and at the same time love the perpetuators of the system. We must work passionately and unrelentingly for full stature as citizens, but may it never be said, my friends, that to gain it we use the inferior methods of falsehood, malice, hate, and violence. So we are courageous and we are using this love to stand and oppose any of our opponents, but we're seeking to have friendship. We're seeking to have friends. Let's go back just really quickly. Nonviolence seeks to win friendship and understanding. I have to be able to reconcile with you. I can't reconcile with you if you ain't my friend. If I don't trust you, if I don't have something online with you. So I have to have the soft-minded, the tough-minded and the soft-mindedness, this tough-minded and tender-heartedness, have to be combined. And we have to then put it together in such a way that we do not hurt or harm the people who we are seeking to be, that we are in opposition against. We must find friendship with them. We must find a way to reconcile. We must find that, because otherwise we can't have the beloved community. And so he says, we we must work passionately and unrelentlessly for our full stature, but we must never do things that are hurtful or harmful. We must not lie. We must not be full of malice or hatred or violence. This is what Dr. King is saying. And so we jump now to principles 3 and 4. Nonviolence seeks to defeat injustice, not people. Nonviolence recognizes that evildoers are also victims and are not evil people. The nonviolent resistors, so we're really trying to say, many people have said it before, hate the sin, love the sinner, but it's really hard to do when you're dealing with it right here, right now in your face. It's difficult sometimes. So we have to be mindful, we have to remember, we have to go back and consider every moment that, okay, we want to separate this thing. We don't want to just take the whole person and throw them away, because I can't reconcile with that person. I have to take this one portion of them. I have to hate what they're doing to me. I have to hate this policy. I have to hate the action, but I cannot hate the perpetuator, because they may also, this person doing it may have been forced to do it. It's their job. This is what they said in Germany. It was that they were just being told to do this stuff. They were doing a job. They said it in apartheid. They're saying it here in the United States. I'm doing my job. I'm doing what I'm told to do. This is what I've been told. So we have to then separate the thing that they do from the person doing it. Then he says, nonviolence holds that suffering for a just cause can educate and transform people and societies. Nonviolence accepts suffering without retaliation. Unearned suffering for a cause is redemptive and has tremendous educational and transforming possibilities. And I'm going to read two pieces for you that illustrates from Dr. King's writings each of these principles. I'm going to start with out of the book is called Strength to Love. These are sermons that Dr. King has given either in his church or to the national audience. Some of the sermons that he has given first to his church became sermons that he gave to national audiences. So sometimes there are pieces that are familiar, or pieces that that sound familiar to you, and there's a reason for that. We're really trying to connect these things that Dr. King has said all the time, over and over and over again. So for principle 3, from love and action. Few words in the New Testament more clearly and solemnly express the magnanimity of Jesus' spirit than the sublime utterance from the cross, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. This is love at its best. We shall not fully understand the great meaning of Jesus' prayer unless we first notice that the text opens with the word then. The verse immediately precedes reads thus, and when they were come to the place which is called Calvary, they were crucified, and the malefactors, one on the right hand and the other on the left. Then said Jesus, Father, forgive them. Then, when he was being plunged into the abyss of nagging agony, then, when man had stooped to his worst, then, when he was dying a most ignominious death, then, when the wicked hands of the creature had dared to crucify the only begotten Son of the Creator, then said Jesus, Father, forgive them. That then might well have been otherwise. He could have said, Father, get even with them, or Father, let loose the mighty thunderbolts of righteous wrath and destroy them, or Father, open the floodgates of justice and permit the staggering avalanche of retribution to pour upon them. But none of these was his response. Those subjected to inexpressible agony, suffering, excruciating pain, and despised and rejected, nevertheless, he cried, Father, forgive them. First is a marvelous expression of Jesus's ability to match words with action. One of the great tragedies of life is that men seldom bridge the gulf between practice and profession, between doing and saying. A persistent schizophrenia leaves so many of us tragically divided against ourselves. On the one hand, we proudly profess certain sublime and noble principles, but on the other hand, we sadly practice the very antithesis of those principles. How often are our lives characterized by a high blood pressure of creeds and an anemia of deeds? We talk eloquently about our commitment to the principles of Christianity, and yet our lives are saturated with the practices of paganism. We proclaim our devotion to democracy, but we sadly practice the very opposite of the democratic creed. We talk passionately about peace, and at the same time, we assiduously prepare for war. We make our fervent pleas for the high road of justice, and then we tread unflinchingly the low road of injustice. This strange dichotomy, this agonizing gulf between the ought and the is, represents the tragic theme of man's earthly pilgrimage. But in the life of Jesus, we find that the gulf is bridged. Never in history was there a more sublime example of the consistency of word and deed. During his ministry in the sunny villages of Galilee, Jesus talked passionately about forgiveness. This strange doctrine awakened the questioning mind of Peter. How oft, he asked, shall my brother sin against me and I forgive him? Till 7 times? Peter wanted to be legal and statistical, but Jesus responded by affirming that there is no limit to forgiveness. I say not until 7 times, but until 70 times 7. In other words, forgiveness is not a matter of quantity, but of quality. A man cannot forgive up to 499 times without forgiveness becoming a part of the habit structure of his being. Forgiveness is not an occasional act. It is a permanent attitude. Jesus also admonished his followers to love their enemies and to pray for them that despitefully use them. This teaching fell upon the ears of many of his hearers like a strange music from a foreign land. Their ears were not attuned to the tonal qualities of such amazing love. They have been taught to love their friends and hate their enemies. Their lives have been conditioned to seek redress in the time-honored tradition of retaliation. Yet Jesus taught them that only through a creative love for their enemies could they be children of their Father in heaven, and also that love and forgiveness were absolute necessities for spiritual maturity. The moment of testing emerges. Christ, the innocent Son of God, is stretched in painful agony on an uplifted cross. What place is there for love and forgiveness now? How will Jesus react? What will he say? The answer to these questions bursts forth in majestic splendor. Jesus lifts his thorn-crowned head and cries in words of cosmic proportions, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." This was Jesus's finest hour. This was his heavenly response to his earthly rendezvous with destiny. We sense the greatness of this prayer by contrasting it with nature, which, caught in the finality of her impersonal structure, does not forgive. In spite of the agonizing pleas of men trapped in the path of an onrushing hurricane, or the anguished cry of the builder falling from the scaffold, nature expresses only a cold, serene, and passionless indifference. She must honor everlastingly her fixed, immutable laws. When these laws are violated, she has no alternative except to follow inexorably her path of uniformity. Nature does not and cannot forgive. I think that really just underscores the idea that we want to seek to defeat the injustice. We forgive this person for causing this harm, and then find a way to eradicate the harm. Love the person, get rid of the harm. And then he says, nonviolence holds that suffering for a just cause can educate and transform people and societies. And so I'm going to read from his writing, Principle, Pilgrimmage to Nonviolence, where I get the title of this presentation from. He says, more recently, I have come to see the need for a method of nonviolence in international relations. Although I was not yet convinced of its efficacy in conflicts between nations, I felt that while war could never be a positive good, it could serve as a negative good by preventing the spread and growth of an evil force. War, horrible as it is, might be preferable to surrender to a totalitarian system. But now I believe that the potential destructiveness of modern weapons totally rules out the possibility of war ever achieving even a negative good. If we assume that mankind has a right to survive, then we must find an alternative to war and destruction. In our day of space vehicles and guided ballistic missiles, the choice is either nonviolence or non-existence. I am not a doctrinaire pacifist, but I have tried to embrace a realistic pacifism, which finds the pacifist position as the lesser evil in the circumstances. I do not claim to be free from the moral dilemmas that Christian non-pacifists confront, but I am convinced that the church cannot be silent while mankind faces the threat of nuclear annihilation. If the church is true to her mission, she must call for an end to the arms race. Some of my personal sufferings over the last few years have also served to help and shape my thinking. I always hesitate to mention these experiences for fear of conveying the wrong impression. A person who constantly calls attention to his trials and sufferings is in danger of developing a martyr complex and impressing others that he is consciously seeking sympathy. It is possible for one to be self-centered in his self-sacrifice, but I feel somewhat justified in mentioning them in this essay because of the influence they have had upon my thought. Due to my involvement in the struggle for the freedom of my people, I have known very few quiet days in the last few years. I have been imprisoned in Alabama and Georgia 12 times. My home has been bombed twice. A day seldom passes that my family and I are not the recipients of threats of death. I have been the victim of a near fatal stabbing. So in a real sense, I have been battered by the storms of persecution. I must admit that at times I have felt that I could no longer bear such a heavy burden and have been tempted to retreat to a more quiet and serene life. But every time such a temptation appeared, something came to strengthen and sustain my determination. I have learned now that the master's burden is light precisely when we take his yoke upon us. My personal trials have also taught me the value of unmerited suffering. As my sufferings mounted, I soon realized that there were two ways in which I could respond to my situation. Either to react with bitterness or seek to transform the suffering into a creative force. I decided to follow the latter course. Recognizing the necessity for suffering, I have tried to make of it a virtue. If only to save myself from bitterness, I have attempted to see my personal ordeals as an opportunity to transfigure myself and heal the people involved in the tragic situation which now obtains. I have lived these last few years with the conviction that unearned suffering is redemptive. There are some who still find the cross a stumbling block. Others consider it foolishness. But I am more convinced than ever before that it is the power of God unto social and individual salvation. So like the Apostle Paul, I can now humbly yet proudly say, I bear in my body the marks of the Lord Jesus. The agonizing moments through which I have passed during the last few years have also drawn me closer to God. More than ever before, I am convinced of the reality of a personal God. True, I have always believed in the personality of God, but in the past, the idea of a personal God was little more than a metaphysical category that I found theologically and philosophically satisfying. Now it is a living reality that has been validated in the experiences of everyday life. God has been profoundly real to me in recent years. In the midst of outer dangers, I have felt an inner calm. In the midst of lonely days and dreary nights, I have heard an inner voice saying, "Lo, I will be with you." When the chains of fear and the manacles of frustration have all but stymied my efforts, I have felt the power of God transforming the fatigue of despair into the buoyancy of hope. I am convinced that the universe is under the control of a loving purpose, and that in the struggle for righteousness, man has cosmic companionship, so that suffering is going to benefit me and it's going to transform the world. Dr. King, is the idea of working with this. I love it. I can understand it. But to see it and realize it and then try to incorporate it in your personal life, it may seem daunting, but I think that's where that belief and that relying on faith really comes in. And this is what Dr. King alludes to, but also lives out. And so we move to the last two principles. Nonviolence, number 5, nonviolence chooses love instead of hate. Nonviolence resists violence of the spirit as well as of the body. Nonviolent love is spontaneous, unmotivated, unselfish, and creative. And so I'll read from Loving Your Enemies to illustrate. I mean, really all of his writings illustrated, but I think this kind of does it in an interesting way as well. Probably no admonition of Jesus has been more difficult to follow than the command to love your enemies. Some men have sincerely felt that its actual practice is not possible. It is easy, they say, to love those of you who love you. It is easy, they say, to love those who love you. But how can one love those who openly and insidiously seek to defeat you? Others, like the philosopher Nietzsche, contend that Jesus' exhortation to love one's enemy is a testimony to the fact that the Christian ethic is designed for the weak and cowardly, and not for the strong and courageous. Jesus, they say, was an impractical idealist. In spite of these insistent questions and persistent objections, this command of Jesus challenges us with new urgency. Upheaval after upheaval have reminded us that modern man is traveling along a road called hate, in a journey that will bring us to destruction and damnation. Far from being the pious injunction of a utopian dreamer, the command to love one's enemy is an absolute necessity for our survival. Love even for our enemies is the key to the solution of the problems of our world. Jesus is not an impractical idealist. He is the practical realist. I am certain that Jesus understood the difficulty inherent in the act of loving one's enemy. He never joined the ranks of those who talk glibly about the easiness of moral life. He realized that every genuine expression of love grows out of a consistent and total surrender to God. So when Jesus said, "Love your enemy," he was not unmindful of its stringent qualities. Yet he meant every word of it. Our responsibility as Christians is to discover the meaning of this command and seek passionately to live it out in our daily lives. Let us be practical and ask, how do we love our enemies? First, we must develop and maintain the capacity to forgive. He who is devoid of the power to forgive is devoid of the power to love. Second, we must recognize that the evil deed of the enemy neighbor, the thing that hurts, never quite expresses all that he is. An element of goodness may be found even in our worst enemy. This simply means that there is some good in the worst of us and some evil in the best of us. When we discover this, we are less prone to hate our enemies. When we look beneath the surface, beneath the impulsive evil deed, we see within our enemy neighbor a measure of goodness and love that the viciousness of and evilness of his acts are not quite representative of all that he is. We see him in a new light. We recognize that his hate grows out of fear, pride, ignorance, prejudice, and misunderstanding. But in spite of this, we know God's image is ineffably etched in his being. Then we love our enemies by realizing that they are not totally bad and that they are not beyond the reach of God's redemptive love. Third, we must not seek to defeat or humiliate the enemy, but to win his friendship and understanding. Repeating principle 2. At times, we are able to humiliate our worst enemy. Inevitably, his weak moments will come and we are able to thrust in his side the spear of defeat, but we must not do this. Every word and deed must contribute to an understanding with the enemy and release the vast reservoirs of goodwill which have been blocked by impenetrable walls of hate. The meaning of love is not to be confused with some sentimental outpouring. Love is something much deeper than emotional bosh. Perhaps the Greek language can clear out our confusion at this point. I'm repeating it because I think it bears repeating. In the Greek Testament, there are 3 words for love. The word eros is a sort of aesthetic or romantic love. In the Platonic dialogues, eros is a yearning of the soul for the realm of the divine. The second word, philia, is a reciprocal love and the intimate affection and friendship between friends. We love those whom we like, and we love because we are loved. The third is agape, understanding and creative, redemptive goodwill for all men. An overflowing love which seeks nothing in return. Agape is the love of God operating in the human heart. At this level, we love men not because we like them, nor because their ways appeal to us, nor even because they possess some type of divine spark. We love every man because God loves him. At this level, we love the person who does an evil deed, although we hate the deed that he does. Now that we can see what Jesus meant when he said, love your enemies, we should be happy that he did not say, like your enemies. It is almost impossible to like some people. Like is a sentimental and affectionate word. How can we be affectionate towards a person whose avowed aim is to crush our very being and place innumerable stumbling blocks in our path? How can we like a person who is threatening our children and embalming our homes? This is impossible. But Jesus recognized that love is greater than like. When Jesus bids us to love our enemies, he is speaking neither of eros or philia. He is speaking of agape, understanding and creative, redemptive goodwill for all men. Only by following this way and responding with this type of love are we able to be children of our Father who is in heaven. Let us move now from the practical how to the theoretical why. Why should we love our enemies? The first reason is fairly obvious. Returning hate for hate multiplies hate, adding deeper darkness to a night already devoid of stars. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. Hate multiplies hate, violence multiplies violence, and toughness multiplies toughness in a descending spiral of destruction. Another reason why we must love our enemies is that hate scars the soul and distorts the personality. Mindful that hate is an evil and dangerous force, we too often think of what it does to the person hated. This is understandable, for hate brings irreparable damage to its victims. We have seen its ugly consequences in the ignominious deaths brought to 6 million Jews by a hate-obsessed madman named Hitler, in the unspeakable violence inflicted upon Negroes by bloodthirsty mobs, in the dark horrors of war, and in the terrible indignities and injustices perpetuated against millions of God's children by unconscionable oppressors. But there's another side which we must never overlook. Hate is just as injurious to the person who hates. Like an unchecked cancer, hate corrodes the personality and eats away its vital unity. Hate destroys a man's sense of values and his objectivity. It causes him to describe the beautiful as ugly and the ugly as beautiful, and to confuse the true with the false and the false with the true. A third reason why we should love our enemies is that love is the only force capable of transforming an enemy into a friend. We can never get rid of an enemy by meeting hate with hate. We get rid of an enemy by getting rid of enmity. By its very nature, hate destroys and tears down. By its very nature, love creates and builds up. Love transforms with redemptive power. Of course, this is not practical. Life is a matter of getting even, of getting back, of dog eat dog. Am I saying that Jesus commands us to love those who hurt and oppress us? Do I sound like most preachers, idealistic and impractical? Maybe in some distant utopia you say that idea will work, but not in the hard, cold world in which we live. My friends, we have followed the so-called practical way for too long a time now, and it has led inexorably to deeper confusion and chaos. Time is cluttered with the wreckage of communities which surrender to hatred and violence. For the salvation of our nation and the salvation of mankind, we must follow another way. This does not mean that we abandon our righteous efforts. With every ounce of our energy, we must continue to rid this nation of the incubus of segregation. But we shall not in the process relinquish our privilege and our obligation to love. While abhorring segregation, we shall love the segregationist. This is the only way to create the beloved community. And then finally, principle 6. Nonviolence believes that the universe is on the side of justice. The nonviolent resistor has a deep faith that justice will eventually win. Nonviolence believes that God is a God of justice. And so I turn to his sermon, The Answer to a Perplexing Question. Human life through the centuries has been characterized by man's persistent efforts to remove evil from the earth. Seldom has man thoroughly adjusted himself to evil, for in spite of his rationalizations, compromises, and alibis, he knows that the is not the ought, and the actual is not the possible. Though the evils of sensuality, selfishness, and cruelty often rise aggressively in his soul, something within tells him that they are intruders and reminds him of his higher destiny and more noble allegiance. Man's hankering after the demonic is always disturbed by his longing for the divine. As he seeks to adjust the demands of time, he knows that eternity is his ultimate habitat. When man comes to himself, he knows that evil is a foreign invader that must be driven from the native soils of his soul before he can achieve moral and spiritual dignity. But the problem that has always hampered man has been his inability to conquer evil by his own power. In pathetic amazement, he asks, why can I not cast it out? Why can I not remove this evil from my life? This agonizing, perplexing question recalls an event that occurred immediately after Christ's transfiguration. Coming down from the mountain, Jesus found a small boy who was in wild convulsions. His disciples had tried desperately to cure the unhappy child, but the more they labored to heal him, the more they realized their own inadequacies and the pathetic limitations of their power. When they were about to give up in despair, their Lord appeared on the scene. After the father of the child told Jesus of the failure of the disciples, Jesus rebuked the devil and he departed out of him. And the child was cured from that very hour. When the disciples were later alone with their master, they asked, why could not we cast him out? They wanted an explanation for their obvious limitations. Jesus said that their failure was caused by their unbelief. If ye have faith as a grain of mustard seed, ye shall say unto this mountain, remove hence to yonder place, and it shall remove. and nothing shall be impossible unto you. They had tried to do by themselves what could only be done after they had so surrendered their natures to God that his strength flowed freely through them. And so that is to believe that through the faith of God, faith of the universe, faith of however you want to say it, but you have to have faith not only in your own immediate, but the faith that this is the right thing to do, that the right is going to balance out the wrong. When I was in school years ago, the math teacher I had says the equation was always balanced. And I always understood balance to be the correct way that we're supposed to be. And that when things are in imbalance, that's when something isn't supposed to be, when something is not supposed to be in place and is, or when something is supposed to be in place and isn't. And so we have to find that, understanding that no matter how you understand it, in mathematics, in the universe, and religion, there is this arc that the universe bends towards balance, towards justice, towards the right. And faith through the Christian experience and submitting yourself to the belief and the teachings will continue that faith and make it so that you do the work that will lead you to the right side of justice, to the right thing to do. And I think that these writings have underscored, and I hope that they have enlightened to you these 6 principles. And so these are the 6 principles. I wanted to just take, this is, I think, a good time to talk about a break. We're about an hour and 15 minutes in. So, hey, Kelly.
Yeah. Sure, you want to take a break until 3 o'clock then? Give us about 5-6 minutes.
Sure, that works out perfectly. I will pause this. And so when we come back, this is what we'll see though. We'll come right back to jumping into the 6 steps of nonviolence. And then I will open, though, if there are any questions up until this point, if there's anything that anybody wanted to insert, because moving from the principles into the steps of nonviolence doesn't change much, and this won't be spent with as much reading from me. It'll be much more just describing these 6 steps and understanding how these 6 steps relate to the 6 principles. But let's take our break and then we'll come back and do all of that. How about that?
Okay, no questions in the chat yet, but if anyone has any, feel free to type them out and we'll get them addressed.
And feel free to, let it ruminate, think about it, wrestle with it, think about it. If there's something that popped up or whatever, this is a good time to let it come out. And then maybe when we come back, those questions will have formed.
All right, we'll rejoin at 3 then.
All right, peace.
All right, it's 3 o'clock. Do you want to get started again, Yolanda? Are you ready? There's no questions in the chat at the moment, so we can just continue forward.
All right then, so there we go. Oh my goodness, I'm trying to get I did something. There we go. All right, we're back. I hit something. All right, we can see everything back together. 6 steps of nonviolence.
Actually, we're seeing your whole screen right now, so maybe can you expand out the slide?
Hold on. I'm gonna pause just a second.
Okay.
Get out of all of that. So I think I opened up the presentation in more than one place.
Oh.
So there we go. Give me a second.
And Yolanda, there are 2 questions in the chat. I don't know if you want to get to them. I can read them to you, or you want to wait. I don't know.
Oh, I see. What is the name of the book?
Yes.
So there are 2 books that I have used mostly, used for the majority of this presentation. The first book is called Strength to Love. I will put it in the, yes, somebody, Father Patrick put it in, Strength to Love. That's right. It's called Strength to Love. That's where these different sermons are coming from. It is a really, really, really good resource of Dr. King's sermons. I also, the work that I did in terms of the study, and that's also where a lot of the information from the actual pilgrimage, that's where the writing Pilgrimmage to Nonviolence is as well. So it's not just the sermons, that is also included in Strength to Love. But I also have this piece called Trumpet of Conscience. It includes sermons as well, but it was a lecture series that he did in Canada. And it really provided a lot of just support material. And also there's a piece, there are a few pieces in here that, depending upon the need or desire for more of Dr. King's words, there are some pieces that are in that book that I certainly wanted to, I'm happy to share with you all as well. And then there are other books that are just very supportive of his knowledge and that record what he was thinking about at different times in his journey. Why We Can't Wait is a good one. And then the last book that he wrote, Where Do We Go From Here? It looks good on my computer, but I don't know if it looks backwards to you guys. So these are all these are just some of the books that I have utilized to create this presentation and to learn more about Dr. King. I got them all from the King Center's bookstore. It's just, you know, a way to keep supporting of them. I mean, however you get it, he will get the acknowledgement, and it goes back to the King family, but the bookstore always wants to get a little bit of light as well. So is there another question? What was the other one?
Yes, there was a question from Brian O'Neill. It says, thank you, Ms. Jack, for this powerful and beautiful presentation. Question is, given the incredible relevance to our world today, if the Wright Museum or Dr. King Institute has practical suggestions for implementation of Dr. King's vision by ordinary citizens living in a troubled nation?
And actually, I'll jump in real quick, Yolanda. We had a question in the Q&A along the same lines too. So I think that might be leading into the next part of your presentation.
Cool. So these steps, right? So this is what we're getting ready to go into now, because these principles are big and they are major and they are deep and they are like, but then Dr. King, he is a practical man. He even speaks about Jesus's practicality and the fact that he understood this is not some simple thing. And so we're going to give you some steps. Dr. King laid out some steps for us as well. So let me get my PowerPoint back up. And then we will go from there. What is going on? I am having fun. Here we go. Share screen. I apologize having to go through this again. I was so good at it when I was practicing it in my by myself. Do y'all see the so you got it back how you had it before, everybody? Good?
Yep, looks good now.
Great. All right, so 6 steps to nonviolence. The first step, gather information. What do you got to find out? Everything. You got to find out all of the stuff that is pertinent to the issue, your situation, and not only your personal, like talk to the community. How is everybody is dealing with this experience? Is this something that we all share? Oh, that person said they had a different experience. Oh, let's bring that into. So gather the information, but not only your side, you got to know the other side too. You got to know the opposites, the opposing side. They say so good that you explain their position better than they do. That's the knowledge of the level of knowledge that you want to have when you gather information. So you go to your website, you do surveys, you ask, you have interviews, you have town halls, whatever it is, you do gather this information, because this is the thing. That's the crust that's going to establish how we move forward. What are we trying to do? What is our goal? This is the stuff that's happening to put all of that into action. And once you gather that information, you then disseminate it. One of the interesting things that when I was in the King Center in 2018 when I went, and then just recently I did the same seminar, or it was a digital version of the seminar that I went to in 2018. And they said it then and they said it again now, and it struck me very, very differently this time. If you have enough information and you disseminate it well enough, you can solve the problem. If you have enough information, the good information, proper information, and then you get that around to you and your opponent and they understand, now we can begin to deal with misunderstandings. Now we can get into a misgiving. Oh, I didn't think that, oh, that's my bad. Because we've seen it. I know I've seen it at the museum amongst kids when something happened with their lunch, or at my family, my children, them growing up, even now amongst my husband, myself, oh, I'm sorry, I thought you said such and such. I was operating. So when you get that information, you must communicate it. That information spreading is how we begin to level the playing ground. And the important thing about it is you don't want to gather the information and hold on to it like it's some sort of secret, because then it's not allowing me to connect with you. If we are supposedly opponents dealing with something to solve an issue, sharing the knowledge, even in law, I guess I read about or heard about how the defense attorney is supposed to receive all of the stuff that the prosecutor is going to use to prosecute their client on. Was that Discovery, right? Something like that. What's that? Law and Order, all of those shows. But that's the idea. The dissemination of information helps to deal with, okay, I get it. This is what we're working on. That's the second thing. So get that information and then spread it. Now, once we have the information, we got to do something that's going to be deep and heavy and important. We got to commit to nonviolence. We got to recommit the fact that we understand what's going on. We know what's been happening. We are committing ourselves to doing what we need to do, accepting suffering if it needs to happen, but it is for our work and justice. We must commit ourselves. And that image of Dr. King and Mrs. King, and I love that stance that John Lewis has, and he's standing next to A. Philip Randolph. That's that commitment, because they had just arrived to the steps. They had just completed. I got to put my glasses on because I don't want to say it wrong. They had just completed the Selma to Montgomery march in Alabama, so they had just arrived, and that commitment to get to Montgomery, they had to try more than once. They had to be decided. We're gonna do this. We're not gonna give up. And we're going to accept what may. That's the other thing about it. We got to be committed. So that commitment cannot be understated. It is so important, because this is how we move into the next step, which is negotiation. Because now we got to come to the table. We've gathered the information. We know the opponent's side. We know our position. We're committed to being nonviolent. Let's go talk. Let's go connect with them. Let's go see if we can discuss this rationally, with grace and intellect, engage with the opponent with a list of issues and with a plan to address and resolve. Do not seek to humiliate, look for the win-win, combining multiple principles here and then putting them into action. Here we do it in negotiation. This is how we do our nonviolence. We're talking, we've communicated, we've learned, we've got what we know, we learned what you know, put it together. Now let's see if we can solve the situation. This is what I would like to see happen. This is how I believe this can help you. This is, I mean, and when the person says, well, this will help me, great. Well, let's see how we can incorporate that. What can we do that's going to go for the win-win? As I said before, it's going to be important for there to be a win-win, because if I win, but you don't, are you going to be happy about the circumstance, the negotiation? How many times have people come back from the if you're a member of a union, you know this. If you're a teacher, you know this. How many times have they come back from negotiation table? People like, what? I ain't say, and mad, and they're not down with the agreement. So you must have a way for both sides to find some benefit. Now, you're not going to say everybody wins everything. No, that can't be. But there's going to be portions that you do win from and that they do win from. And so now we can seam together the pieces that were ripped of our community and become back again as the beloved community. That's the whole point, to resolve, because we got to have reconciliation at the end. That is the goal. And we see Dr. King, along with Roy Wilkins, James Farmer, and along with Whitney Young, they're in negotiations for they were meeting, discussing Dr. King deal with poverty and just dealing with the civil rights movement and action. So we see that idea to come together to the table and listen and leaning in, be there with each other, trying, we know the history of how that worked out. It did and it didn't. Yeah. But that's the goal of the negotiation. If negotiations break down, if negotiations aren't real, because something that I also learned at the King Center, that the understanding of the concept that you can't negotiate with somebody who's not your equal. If they ain't come to negotiate for real, if they didn't come to have real, if they didn't have a genuine feeling of equality and we're coming to do this, we're trying to do this, then you cannot negotiate with them. If they came with some namby-pamby kind of, you cannot know. Then you must then find a way to interrupt, agitate, to create a tension that will apply moral pressure to the opponent so that they now come back to the negotiation tables. We remember these actions and activities when we remember the actions of the civil rights movement. What happened in Selma? What happened in Montgomery? What happened all across the South when they would stand up and when they would go sit down to the bus boycotts, when they would sit in, when they would swim in, when they would wade in? These were the effects of creating attention. You're gonna arrest us. You're gonna arrest so many of us. How many of us you're gonna arrest? You don't have room to arrest us. And there's still more people coming. So they had to relent. So they had to figure, so we have to find a way to disturb the circumstances and create that tension so that there will be an interruption of the status quo. But we don't want to also make that direct action be so harmful or so stringent that it destroys the community altogether. Like we still have to live here. We still have to be here. So this is why nonviolence is so important, because we cannot, this is how war does, because after the end of war, you have regret and bitterness after every violent rebellion. Every time my mother spoke about what happened after 67 and 68, she was a little girl, a teenager, adolescent, 12 years old, 13 years old, respectively. And these circumstances, the situations that she lived in, and I'm sure you all can relate, afterwards. The excitement, the terror, the fear, but then afterwards, somebody got to clean that mess up. Somebody got to come back and build it. And the city still bears the scars of those rebellions and riots or whatever you want to call them, because you go to those neighborhoods where those neighborhoods burned, where there were damage done. Those neighborhoods are still to many degrees unbuilt. So the bitterness afterwards lingers. So we must find a way that when we do our direct action, and this is the example I think that really underscores it well, when you don't have a way to restore the community afterwards, it stays broken. We don't have a way to find reconciliation because we are never on the same page. We never came together. We were always separate. We were never equal as negotiation. They didn't really believe in building up the community, some people say. You know what I mean? So this is where we really understand. And after the direct action, you must finally back to reconciliation. Because again, that is the whole point. That is the whole purpose. What are we doing this work for? Why are we trying to build it? Because if we weren't trying to change it, I mean, we would just become all isolations and you over here, over there, but that hasn't worked yet. And we can't do it in the US anyway. So love is creative and redemptive, Dr. King says. Love builds up and unites. Hate tears down and destroys. The aftermath of the fight with fire method is that which you suggest is bitterness and chaos. The aftermath of the love method is reconciliation and creation of the beloved community. Physical force can repress, restrain, coerce, destroy, but it cannot create and organize anything permanent. Only love can do that. Yes, love, which means understanding, creative, redemptive, goodwill, even for one's enemy. The solution to the race problem, the solution to the humanity problem. For me, that is it, because it seeks friendship and understanding with the opponent. It is directed towards the evil of the system and the forces and unjust actions and policies, not the individual. It allows the opponents to, all right, we're here and we're still here. And we brought this thing together. This is how we've now sewn our community together. This is how we've repaired this rip in our society, the fabric that we find in our communities. And so I do now want to open for any questions or any discussion. This image here, I just wanted to point out, if there are no questions right now, I didn't see any pop up. But if there, or I hadn't seen any thus far, this is an image of after Stokely Carmichael was released from jail in Alabama. They're sitting down, and one of the things that I read during the march that SNCC and Carmichael, Stokely Carmichael, and Dr. King walked on, this concept of Black Power came up. And Stokely brings up the fact that he purposefully brought it up. And kind of was like trying to put Dr. King on the spot, like, you know, is he gonna claim Black Power or is he not? And Dr. King found a way to shape and mold the situation so that it didn't stay confronted on that circumstance. Now, Black Power never went away. And Dr. King and Carmichael, as we know, did not reconcile in that way. Stokely went off and became Kwame Ture and went in a whole different direction, still towards liberation, but in a different direction away from what Dr. King was thinking about, because he was frustrated. And Dr. King speaks about that. And maybe, I'm not sure if it's the selection that I've chosen, if we want more reading, that may be in there, but it's really an interesting conversation that they have that he alludes to. And so, yeah, here we go, if there are any questions for real.
If anyone would like to raise their hands, you can click on the raise your hand button and we can unmute you so that you could ask the question, or feel free to type it in the chat.
Yes.
Could you show the slide with nonviolence as a hyphenated word versus nonviolence as a non-hyphenated word again?
Yep, give me a second, let me go find it. Let's see. Here we go. You got it?
Yep, we can see it.
Yeah, that concept, that was one of the first things they talked to us about. When I went to Atlanta in 2018, I went to the King Center, and it was actually, it was the beginning of January. It was like maybe 2 or so weeks before the King holiday. It was cold, but not really very cold. It was kind of like how it is now, and kind of snowy and gray. And I walked into that building and it was so warm, and so it was as if I walked into an oasis. I really felt like I was walking into the people deal with energy and vibrations. You could feel the love. Like you could, it was there. It was the concept of it, or certainly maybe the readings of it, the talking about it over the years has concentrated that energy of love in that space. Yeah, go ahead.
What?
Is there somebody with a question?
Oh, yes, sorry. This is Mary. I was trying to figure out how to ask the question about, do you want to reconcile differences? If only one side wants to reconcile, how do you get the conversation going if that thinking isn't mutual?
So it has to be, and this is where the creativity and the genius of the individual and also of Dr. King kind of comes in, because he speaks to that when we're thinking about, if the people aren't ready to negotiate, if the circumstances, we can put it in terms of individuals, I think, but we can also put it in terms of systems or opponents, political opponents, perhaps. If there is no agreement to talk, then you must find that that direct action. There must be something that we can do. There must be a way. There must be a way to help appeal to them the circumstance of my my being. Why is it so important? This is because you're not trying to kind of stop somebody or deal with somebody on a light or trivial issue. So if it means so much to you, then this is when it becomes the impetus becomes on you to find a way to help bring them to the table, help them see the importance or understand the significance of how it could help them. This is that or if during the direct action, if you're able to find a direct action that works and stops it, then they'll come back to the table willingly. Okay, let's talk.
Thank you.
And we do have a question from Father Patrick. Is there a sermon that you find particularly powerful? And if so, which one is it and why?
Oh, man.
That's a big question, right?
Right. Well, I mean, because I think that there are multiple sermons that I have read that are powerful. I think the Christmas Eve sermon is one that people go to a lot. But the one I think that might be the one that spoke to me the most, and maybe it's a timing thing. So right now, how I feel, a tough mind and tender heart, because of just the dynamic in my own family and the fact that we have some tough-minded people in my house. All of us are independent. We're very, if you know anything about Kwanzaa, the concept of self-determination or Kujichagulia is strong in my house. So that tough-mindedness, independent spirit is very, very strong. And so it's been a real, in the fact that there is burgeoning independence in my house. My children are 21 and 19. So that independent spirit is even stronger. And so the relationship of the child to parent has had to be different. And so we've had to deal with tough mind and tenderheartedness really closely. Like my husband and son, this young man and this grown man, you know, this testosterone and that male energy of independence. My daughter going off to college and asserting her, you know, nascent independence. This is, you know, hey, okay, be grown, but finding a way to temper that stringent parent behavior to understanding that this is now an individual who has their own opinions and their own rights to do for themselves what they believe is right, irrespective of the fact that you may agree with them or not. So this is tough, a tough mind and tender heart certainly has been on my mind a lot. And then just knowing that he wrote so eloquently about love in so many ways and so much. Although I went to church as a little girl, Father, and I was baptized when I was a little girl. I stopped going to church when I was 18, and I haven't been a member of one since. So I don't consider myself a Christian anymore. However, I have always understood the importance of love. And the time that I was born, that was a big subject of songs in terms of universal love and all of that kind of stuff. So it just kind of was imbued in me. And so every time I see or read or hear things that vibrate universal love or humanity love, these things really resonate with me in a strong way. And so many of the writings of Dr. King, this is why it's hard for me to answer the question definitively, because it'll change. Ask me tomorrow, it'll be a different one.
Well, you know, that actually is a great segue into another question from Deacon Jean. Dr. King calls for a change of heart and says that nature cannot and does not forgive. So can you have a change of heart without religious conversion? And you had mentioned your own, you know, kind of moving away from that. So what do you think?
I think that yes. I mean, whether or not you belong to a religion, the interesting thing that everybody talks about, religious people or non-religious people, there's an energy, there's an essence, there's a thing about this spark in us, intellect, whatever you want to call it. There's a thing in us that makes us be who we are, and it gives us our consciousness, and maybe it is conscience. The fact that we have expressions of emotion, and this, whether or not you belong to a religion or not, is an opportunity to express universal emotions, pride, hate, love, you know, these things. That's humanity wide. I don't care what religion or language or whatever. That's, if you are human, this is your language. This is your real for real language. This consciousness, how you feel. So I think that yes, absolutely, you can have a change of heart without belonging to or adhering to religious codes. However, you do have to submit yourself to understanding that this emotion is greater than you. Love is greater than anybody. You know, potentially hate could be, you know what I mean? Malice, anger, you know, these things, kindness, this is stuff that we have and know about and understand. So yes, you can change a person's heart, whether they are religious or not, I believe. But I think that is not so important about whether I believe that the person's heart can change. Does the person believe their heart can change? I think is the more important question.
That's a great note to leave it on. We're hitting our 3:30 mark, which is the end of the time that we had allotted. We can leave the line open if folks want to continue having some conversation. I think, Yolanda, you're available to hang around for a little longer.
I am.
Okay, and if you would like to leave, thank you for joining us today. Jim, what is the best way for people to participate, do you think? Just raising their hands or through the chat?
If people raise their hand, that we can unmute their mic and they can talk. And they probably should say who they are, since not everyone knows.
Okay.
If I could just chime in for just a second, I just want to kind of officially thank all our panelists and the organizers, specifically by name, because this was something that we have been praying about. I want you all on the line to know that we've spent countless hours and meetings at all hours of the day and night trying to organize something to keep the continuity going for social injustice. But not only that, as we talked about it earlier, is how we can enact change in our own lives and with our own families, with our own communities, because everything is a start. It's a plant of a seed. So I want to thank from St. Francis Assisi of Ann Arbor, Scott Wright, Jim Russo, Kelly Gauthier, Mary Wakefield, Michelle Iden, Warren Bowman. Big thank you for being on the line. You guys are amazing. And I'm glad and grateful and blessed to be on this journey with you. From Corpus Christi Parish, Cheryl Hill, Bill and Valerie McNeese, Winifred Gale, and also Mary Davis, who was instrumental in putting this together so that we can really have this joyous experience. Big ups to our pastors, our leaders, Father Patrick Gagno, Father Jim Conlin, and then also thank you, Yolanda Jack, for bringing an awesome, explosive, animated experience for what we've just learned today. The 6 principles of nonviolence, and then going into an action plan with gathering our information and educating ourselves and our community, a personal commitment and negotiation, being not afraid to stand at that table and confront these injustices as we encounter them, a direct action. And then what I like the most is reconciliation, because as many of you know, Catholic social teaching is kind of really aligned. I think Dr. Martin Luther King, whether he knew it or not, was a lot more Catholic. Life and dignity of the person, call to family and participation, rights and responsibilities, and caring for the poor and vulnerable, solidarity and dignity, and caring for God's patient. Family, we've been blessed today. I just want to thank God for this experience, and I thank the Holy Spirit for blessing everyone on this call. I want you to enjoy your afternoon. Yolanda, personal note, happy birthday to your mother.
Thank you.
Many, you obviously you come from good seeds because you're an explosive speaker, and we really appreciate having you here today. You were amazing. Thank you, everybody. God is good. Have a beautiful afternoon.
Thank you, Curtis. That was wonderful. And I think we all say a hearty amen to that.
Amen. That's right. Ashe.
So we did have one question in the Q&A from Paul. Yolanda, what do you think Dr. King would want the new Congress to do to advance progress towards nonviolence?
Dr. King would tell them to eradicate the policies and all of these programs that hurt and disenfranchise people from education, housing, opportunities to work. Dr. King and Mrs. King, both of them listed so many ways in so many writings and so many times that they spoke, how violence, lack of healthcare is violence, lack of educational opportunities is violence, lack of taking people's financial opportunities away from them is violence. If I cannot earn a living in my home, in my community, then how am I going to be here? What can I do? Then we're like, I'm going to turn to crime. And now I'm creating more violence. So we have to find ways as politicians on every level. Dr. King was very clear about this, that we must find levels of compassion and justice in every single thing that we do. We cannot afford because this next generation is looking at us. The children, and it's really interesting how things have kind of, what is it? When stuff happens, it all happens for a reason. It all kind of coalesces at one point, sometimes for a particular reason. A lot of things, one of the quotes that I've read is that our children are watching, something about the fact that history will be paying attention to what we do now. Our decisions today, 2021, right now, January 17th, January 18th, all of the things that we're doing policy-wise is going to be the stuff that we're judged on in 5 and 10 and 20 years, 30 years from now. They're going to be looking, okay, well, so they had this big chance in 2020, all of this uprising, all of this unrest, all of this craziness on both sides of the political aisle. We can now decide, are we going to negotiate? Are we going to figure out how to reconcile our nation, which was never done after Reconstruction? During Reconstruction, that was a lie. We called it Reconstruction, but we ain't reconstruct nothing. Because anyway, so the fact is that we have to charge our politicians on every level, city, state, and national levels to be what we sent them to office for. We want policies that are going to educate our children and give our kids clean water and air and land to grow their food in. And we want policies so that they can afford to pay for their rent and have a car and get to a job with transportation of the city or of the community. You know, we have to put these policies in place. The community has to do that. So that's what I would say Dr. King would say.
That's great. And if you think about being guided by love, you know, that would be the type of thing we would be doing, right? So
that's the point.
There's another question here from Andrea. What creative way can you think of to engage a person who blindly follows the beliefs of a dangerous, powerful person?
Where do we connect? What's the first place we connect? That will be that's the first thing I would do. What do I have in common with this person? You know, and also coming to the table, realizing that maybe I won't have a way to negotiate or reconcile with this individual yet. The last thing that I said, yet, where do we connect? And maybe it's not time now, because that's the other thing. Because I know, I mean, in my family, I can say that, you know, the conflicts that we've had, when there has been conflict, it is, you know, it's critical at that moment. But sometimes the tension or the anger or the negative feelings or whatever you want to call it are a result of someone's feeling pressured right now to make a decision. Maybe if the valve is let off through time or through distance, you know, there's an opportunity to have a different frame of reference or a different point of view. Then I could begin to turn around and say, well, all right, maybe we do, you know, maybe you offer this thing, when my mother and I were mad at each other when I was a little girl, she knows I love chocolate, right? So she would, and as I became a teenager, our differences became greater. And there was an occasion when she really made me angry, and because she told me something that was supposed to go down, and when it was supposed to happen, the answer was no. And I had built up all of my plans and expectations to do this event, this activity. People were depending upon me. And when it came down to it, I couldn't do it. And so I was livid. And, you know, I didn't want to talk to her. So maybe, you know, an hour or so passed by, and on my door, it's just like that commercial. I don't know if y'all have seen this TV commercial where the mom, or I think the parent, you know, is trying to talk to the kid, and the kid closes the door, shows the door, and some time passes by, and they knock on the door, and there's a little piece of chocolate there. Well, I think that person was watching my family, because my mother left a Snickers bar. I love chocolate. She left a Snickers bar on the doorknob of the door. So when I opened it, it fell down. And that's how we started talking again. So just you know, where do you connect? What is the thing that I know about you that I agree with, or that I see in me too? Do we both have children? Do we both love sci-fi? Do we both hate tofu?
Common humanality.
Yeah.
And kind of similar, I guess, but focusing a little more about our online world. From Julie, how to deal with the hate and the evil that is hidden and grows via people communicating over the internet. That impersonality of it, I think, is what she's getting at.
It's so difficult in that sphere, because we don't have contact. We don't have there is no, you take the computer almost very effectively takes the personhood out of the individual. They just become like, you know, just a screen or a picture or an avatar. So I think, you know, we have to really tread carefully when we're dealing with the digital sphere, because it's a different animal and we're new to it. So we kind of have to establish the rules and the mores and how we are going to move forward. Right now, it's kind of, you know, wild west out there on the internet. You got the dark web, you got this, you know, it's all kind of craziness going on out there. So, and when something new comes up like that, the nefarious forces, the dark forces want to exploit it. So I think that we should be very mindful. And quite honestly, I don't want to say fearful, but just, we just have to be clear about where you spend your energy. What's the sentence that my daughters and her crew, what you water is what you grow. So when you put that energy, that effort into trying to change somebody's mind on this thing, it could be the case that you doing your own everyday life, and the example that you set in your everyday life, that's the thing that's going to change them, not you coming at them, telling them how was wrong, but was so wrong about what they're doing. It could be literally the case they're waiting for somebody to just shut up and do it and show them the way. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? But I think we just really have to be very mindful of how we put ourselves in the digital sphere. It is difficult for me as a performer to not feel like, I have to be out there on YouTube, and I'm not yet. I will be soon, but, and I'm really thinking about how I go out there and what I present to the world, because I'm an educator at the museum, but I'm also an actor. I'm also a mom who will eventually be a grandmother. I'm a wife, you know what I mean? So I have a lot of people who I have to, and then of course, I don't want to ever embarrass my ancestors. So I have to certainly be very mindful of what I'm doing in the digital sphere, what stuff I'm putting out there. So, is the wild Friday night that I hang out with me and my sister and we acting crazy, throwing marshmallows at each other, that's not gonna go on YouTube or on Facebook. But, okay, we never have had a marshmallow fight, but.
It actually sounds fun though.
It did kind of just there. But my point is, you know what I mean? I think we all have to be very careful. And so the lessons that our kids are learning, about sexting and about all of these crazy chat rooms and all of this stuff, the things that the stars are being embroiled in, the entertainment celebrities and all of them, I think we should learn from their examples. I think we should pay attention. One of my favorite sentences to tell my daughter when she was in high school, and even especially when she was in high school these last couple of years, was you ain't got to go do everything to go see about it. Watch what's going on. Look at the landscape. You don't have to be the example to learn the example. And so I let her watch her friends. And this was really in terms of relationships and kind of boy-girl stuff, because it was, what teenage life is like. And so I wanted to make certain that she was aware that you don't have to just go diving head first into the foray. It's okay to be cautious and measured. There's nothing wrong with that, in my estimation. You know what I mean? So I think that would be where I would err on the side of caution, trying to engage anybody in any chat room or any philosophy, particularly political or religious or, conscious stuff. Because everybody's mind is their own, and everybody, what's the sentence? Everybody has an opinion.
Yeah. And kind of along those lines, I guess, from Brian, so that I understand the concept of direct action, just as an example, a real life example we could all understand, were the walkouts and the protests of professional athletes that recently occurred that ended up resulting in multi-billion-dollar sports leagues having to acknowledge change is needed, even when it costs them money. Is that a kind of a tangible example in our time of putting in place these nonviolent principles and acting them out?
In fact, one of the, I'm not sure if it was Curtis or who it was that spoke Colin Kaepernick's name earlier at the beginning of the presentation, but I made a note of that because he did exactly what I don't know that I can't say that he did the education part as well. I believe he did the information gathering because he knew his information. He was able to quote information. He had statistics, he had data. I think where he may have made the mistake is that he didn't, where problems came up, where there was miscommunication and misunderstanding, is the education part of it. And when the education came later, there were already opinions formed. And then you had a whole propaganda decided that he was going to do this, and that that they was already decided. And so the enemies are smart. They're, nobody, we have to presume, and I know amongst church people, if you talk about the devil at all, we understand that he is a knowledgeable individual. That devil energy is not stupid. That's how we are able to be tempted. So we have to be on point with all of these steps. That's the significance of these steps. So that in the direct action, it doesn't have to be a sit-in, it doesn't have to be a you know, anything like that. But it could be a boycott, it could be anything that disrupts the standard behavior. And if it disrupts it enough that people are, what's going on here? What's happening? That's why that education needed to have happened prior, because they will know. Because when he did it, they were like, why are you doing that? What's that for? So yeah, so the direction, so all of these things that people are doing now, the only problem, and I think that what some people on CNN and Fox might, you know, debate back and forth, is the efficacy of the protest of the Black Lives Matter movement. And to them, I would also say they should probably learn a little bit about that education and information portion, those two steps, because I think the movement could go so much further with that piece of the pie in place. But because a lot of people, especially while Dr. King was alive, were very anti-nonviolence because of the semblance of its what people consider weakness. They believe it is weak to be nonviolent. They don't understand, and I did too. For a long time, I didn't want to be aligned with that kind of thing, but I had to admit to myself that I'm a love warrior. I'm a warrior, absolutely, but my weapon is love. So I will not, but and now in my own personal, like everyday, like I to the point where, do I have weapons in my house and stuff like that? Right now I don't, but you know, the circumstances are they are. I'm considering like protecting my home, because I have to realize that this is a real thing. So I'm not trying to be nonviolent to the point where I am, like Dr. King said, a pacifist ready to be rolled over, but neither am I going to, you know, drop my convictions to the point where I'm ready to commit violence against somebody in the name for something that is nonviolence or all supposed to be about love.
You know, building on that, my own personal question here, thinking about, you know, we talked about the internet, we talked about Congress, we talked about Kaepernick and those activities we saw recently. It does seem like, and maybe I'm wrong, with the internet, with all of the media that we have now, it becomes really easy for people to sort of distort the message or turn it into something that it isn't, and get these other ideas out there. I've heard so many people say Black Lives Matter is all about promoting, you know, socialism or whatever. Do you have thoughts on, like, did we see anything from Dr. King's activity that we could say, how do you keep control of your own message when you're trying to get this out into the world?
Well, I think the example that I gave about that image where Stokely and he were together, and that the engagement they had, and gosh, I wish I could find it right now. I don't know what book it's in. If I find it, I'll send it to you. But he speaks about the fact that, you know, because Stokely eventually tells him that I was using you to get this Black Power thing out, because everybody knew Dr. King, and so that was a tactic of Stokely Carmichael to promote this concept of power, this Black power, this kind of renegade, this aggressiveness. And what Dr. King did was he convinced the members of the march who, because there was competing chants at that time. It was the Black Power chant that Stokely and his crew were trying to push forward, and the Freedom Now chant that I guess had been more traditional to the marches. And so at the end of that particular kind of terse conversation, or intense conversation, certainly, I don't know if it was terse, it was the point where they decided, we won't have any of these chants, we'll do a different chant, because we have to understand that we have to be in control. I can't let Black Power take over everything, but I don't want Freedom Now to get lost. So let's find some other way to integrate it. So you do have to be strategic. You have to be thoughtful. You have to be wily. What did Dr. King say? As wise as the serpent. As wise as the serpent, but as you know, as tender as a dove. So you have to find a way to balance those two. And as difficult as it is in this humanity path that we walk, it's hard. I know I don't succeed at all every day. Some days I don't even think about it. There's some days in my mind, like I know, and I'll just admit to this to you all, last summer, I felt particularly violent. And so as a result, I stayed away from those protests. The activist in me when I was in college, the young lady who I was when I was coming up in Detroit, and when I went off to DC, and the life that I had as a 20-something, it was absolutely go protest, absolutely hit the streets, absolutely. Why? Yes. We need to take to the streets. That was my sentimentality. However, last summer, the anger, the rage that I felt, it was painful. I felt in my mind, the vision, and every once in a while I have to fight it away because I have such a clear picture that I wanted to go to a building. It was 2 or 3 buildings that I had in mind. Just go to the building and just take my hands and just pull the building down. I just want, like, I felt that much anger at the way that George Floyd had died, and just the Philando, because I mean, just so many, it was too much. It was too much. And I was angry. I had already had a horrible way of it when Trayvon Martin got killed, because my son and Trayvon Martin are they were contemporaries. I think Trayvon was just a few months older than my son. So I really, it took me on an emotional dive last summer. And so what I had to do to get out of that funk was restore my belief in what arts are about and what's my purpose. How do I get myself out of that funk, is to understand that there is love in the world. And what do I love? Who do I love? And why do I love them? And why do I love this thing? And theater for me, and working at the museum, this education that I engage in has become the reason. This is it. This is I love seeing the lights flick on when these young people recognize that they are not alone in feeling bewildered and confused at the race circumstances in the United States. When they see a grown person also stumble and falter and try to answer why, that makes sense to them. That makes them feel like, oh, okay, I'm not by myself. I can now move with some sort of kind of, okay, this is making sense. And now we can begin to see the importance, the significant importance of how we relate to one another on this planet. I don't know if I answered your question. I think I kind of rambled, but I just think that it was so important for me to say that it was a change in heart for me, because I had gotten so far away from how I felt and my optimism and the love and because when I see people, I guess because of being in the pandemic, we were so isolated. I hug everybody. I hug people 2 and 3 times. I'm a very human kind of a person, so it was difficult. And when I saw this just disrespect of life, and it seemed so unmoved. I felt like I think I felt then like how so many of my ancestors probably felt when they were coming up in Alabama and in Georgia before they left the South. Like I feel like that's how my granddaddy lived in Ohio. I feel like that anger and that rage I had was what any of my uncles would have had, or my grandfathers would have had. The help when Sandra, it was so many people. And so I had to look in myself and find the love. And then because I work at the museum, I have to learn about these people who are so transformative and so powerful. And honestly, last month, Kwanzaa, my work with the community members to develop that, and I have been working with them since September. So I had a real deep dive into community work and community building, and the love that people had for the city of Detroit, for the members of the community that they serve, the love that I share with the individuals, people who I've worked with for years, people who I've known for years. So that really reaffirmed for me at the end of the year, at the close of the year, the last quarter of the year, my faith in humanity, so that I was able to feel some sort of hope in the United States and the circumstances that we live in. So that I was able to reaffirm, I was able to find that commitment, that recommitment to love. And I never really considered myself a person, you know, a Kingian philosophy, you know, I mean, I like what he said, I like what he did, but I never, you know, in learning about it, I realized that I have more in common with him than I think that I had different. And so coming through Kwanzaa and then learning more deeply, reading more deeply into the sermons and the writings of Dr. King really just illustrated the significance of what is at stake. Our whole existence as humans on this planet is up to our decision to either move in love and be just and considerate of other humans on this planet and the world that we live on, or we maintain capitalism and Del may care and it's all about me, and you know, I don't know that I'll have 5 generations after me.
You know, that is a wonderful place to wrap up as we approach the 4 o'clock mark here. I really like the reminder that self-love is also a part of love too. So wrapping it right back to where we began with love. Scott or Jim or anybody, do you need to say anything before we go? I just
Oh,
want to say thank you
Yolanda.
so much. Yolanda, thank
Give a
you.
round of applause to Yolanda.
Yay. It was really great. Thank you for spending the afternoon with us.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here with me. I'm so honored to have shared this time. I really feel, I know how Jonathan, why he was like, make sure you tell him I say hi, because you guys are such beautiful people. And in the weeks that we've been working together, I'm so happy to have made my acquaintance with you, and looking forward to deepening our relationships over the next several years. So yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Be
you
safe
all.
to everybody. I don't even want to hang up. I'm like, I want to hug you.
I feel like you have to
Great
go
hug.
get your mom a cake or something though.
Yeah, I'm gonna, she likes, we have this chocolate thing in common. So I'm gonna go get her one of those big symphony bars. She's feeling under, her allergies have kicked off. So I'm gonna drop off some stuff at the door. I'm not even gonna go in. I'm like, too many germs on me. So come and get it. And I'll send the kindness and the love and esteem that you all sent via me. I'll send it to her. So be certain of it. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This has been amazing. Everybody have a blessed afternoon. This has been awesome.
Yes. Be safe, everybody. Peace, peace.